Chapter 840. Gong Yimo suddenly groaned and woke up. She felt that her red lips were being violated and Gong Yimo pushed him away without thinking. Gong Che was shocked to be suddenly pushed away. Seeing that Gong Yimo had woken up, he suddenly realized that he had lost control of his actions just now. Really, he had wanted to stop after tasting her. His entire body tensed up and he did not know how to face her. But when he thought that she was his fiancée and would be marrying him in 2 days, Gong Che could not help but feel sweet in his heart. He could not help but smile. "You're awake." His voice was very clean, very clear, and was as gentle as usual. But at this moment, Gong Yimo could hear the sweetness in his voice. She sat up strangely and stared at Gong Che vigilantly. All this time, other than the time she took the initiative to kiss Gong Che, they had never been intimate again. And that time, when she kissed Gong Che, he frowned slightly. Gong Yimo thought that she was too passionate and that ancient people could not stand this kind of passion, so they gradually restrained themselves. Now that she thought about it, it was because he did not like her at all. As expected, as long as a person understood one thing, they would be able to see everything clearly. Gong Che had never treated her differently, and she didn't know why she had thought that they were in love with each other before. "What are you doing?" Gong Yimo's tone was cold. This was very similar to how she had rejected him back then. Gong Che was a little flustered. Didn't she say that she loved him? Gong Yimo sneered and said, "Didn't you want to break off the engagement? Now you're harassing me again. What's the meaning of this? Do you think I'm someone who will come and go as you please?" Gong Che then realized that she was still angry. That's right, he was really stupid. He had not explained himself yet. Gong Che smiled again and sat closer to Gong Yimo. "No, I was drunk that day. What I said was nonsense." As he spoke, he carefully grabbed Gong Yimo's hand and slowly tightened his grip. He was so happy that he could actually touch Moa's hand. "I don't want to break off the engagement. I like you. Moa, will you marry me?" Gong Che's expression was infatuated, and his eyes were filled with uncontrollable emotions. But what he didn't expect was that the 2 words Moa that came out of his mouth suddenly provoked Gong Yimo. She recalled that her name also had the word Mo in it. Was Gong Che trying to use her as a substitute? She was bursting with anger. Why did she like such a man in the past? In the beginning, it was because her uncle Emperor married her. Now, he wanted to be with her because of a name. Gong Yimo suddenly pulled her hand back. Gong Che did not know that his words had angered the other party. He saw that her brows were furrowed in anger. "Get out of here. Before I get angry, get out of my sight." Gong Yimo spoke fiercely, but her eyes unconsciously turned red. Gong Che turned pale with fright. He wanted to explain, but seeing Moa crying, he wanted to comfort her. But before he could say anything, Gong Yimo threw a bamboo pillow at him. "Get out. I don't want to see you right now." Gong Che was stunned by the other party's bamboo pillow. He did not think that Moa would be so angry. However, this also showed that she really liked him, which was why she was so angry. Gong Che refused to leave, so Gong Yimo glared at him. Big drops of tears fell from her eyes, making Gong Che's heart ache. He wanted to go forward, but Gong Yimo turned her back and said in a hoarse voice, "If you don't leave, I won't talk to you anymore." She won't talk to him anymore. It was only now that Gong Che was afraid. If Moa ignored him, he would definitely feel terrible. He thought that perhaps his attitude changed too quickly. Moa did not believe him at all. Sigh. It was all his fault. Gong Che regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. There was nothing he could do now. He had no experience in comforting women. He only felt that perhaps he should let Moa calm down at this time. Otherwise, Moa would not listen to anything he said. So he said slowly, "Okay, I'll leave. Mo. Jin. I'll come and see you later." Gong Yimo did not reply. Gong Che sighed and left reluctantly. He was still too young. Little did he know that when Gong Yimo saw that he really left, she felt more and more that Gong Che had ulterior motives for comforting her just now. She became even more upset. After Gong Che left, he was very upset. His fiancée was angry. How could he resolve this misunderstanding? But when he thought about how Mo-er was angry because she cared about him, Gong-che felt sweet in his heart. Mo-er liked him. She realized that she was not unhappy at all when he kissed her. It was obvious that she really loved him. In his heart, he had long been thinking of coaxing Mo-er and quickly getting married. He had even thought of the name of their child. But Mo-er seemed to be really angry. How could he comfort her? Gong-che's expression alternated between surprise, melancholy, annoyance, and sweetness. It scared Du-fu, who was secretly peeping, to the point that he was horrified. He finally realized that there was something wrong with His Highness. Was His Highness possessed? Otherwise, why did he seem like a different person? After Gong-che returned to his residence, he finally had time to think about his own matters. He let the palace servants help him change his clothes while he closed his eyes and pondered. He was no longer the crown prince of the future, who was second only to one person and above everyone else. His imperial mother had hanged herself to death, and his family had all fallen from power. His position as the crown prince was unstable and unfulfilled. Gong-che thought of the dream he had when he was reborn. In the dream, he was 33 years old. With Mo-er's help, he and Gong-dai had divided half of the country. Then he thought of the things he did to Mo-er in the dream, and the regret he felt afterwards. Gong-che couldn't help but spurn himself. He didn't know how to cherish such a good girl. But it didn't matter. Whether it was the previous life or this life, karma was still reincarnation. This time, he came back. He wouldn't be stupid again. He was very clear about what he wanted. Thinking of this, Gong-che couldn't help but raise the corners of his lips. When he thought of how he was about to marry Mo-er, his heart couldn't stop jumping and flipping, as if it was about to fly. The palace servants all felt a bit strange. Usually, the crown prince gave them a gentle and melancholic feeling. But today, they felt that the crown prince was very dazzling. It was clearly the same face, but it was as if he was a different person. After Gong-che changed his clothes, he felt his body become light. In the bronze mirror, his appearance was very blurry. There were many things that Mo-er had brought to him in the future. He didn't have them now, but it didn't matter. Mo-er was here. Mo-er was his. That was enough. He kept thinking about it. He thought that Mo-er's anger should have subsided after half an hour, right? He missed her. After Gong-che tidied himself up, he once again went to Gong Yimo's place. But this time, he learned his lesson. He brought a few of Mo-er's favorite snacks. When he thought of the two of them getting married, he couldn't suppress his smile. Along the way, all the palace servants looked at him as if he was bathing in the spring breeze. Chapter 841. When they reached the door, Gong-che slowed down. He saw that the weather was just right. After he coaxed Mo-er, they could go out for a walk. He couldn't wait to be with Mo-er. Yes, he must coax her well. Gong-che knocked on the door. He carried the food box nervously and didn't let a single palace servant follow him. He was afraid that Mo-er would be embarrassed if they were there. However, no one answered. Gong-che guessed that Mo-er was still angry with him. He frowned and decided to apologize first. Mo, Junjun. Gong-che realized that he kept calling her by the wrong name, but it didn't matter. It was her anyway. He smiled and pressed his hand against the door, quietly listening to the movements inside. The carved door was a little old, and it faintly reflected the scene inside. It didn't matter if Gong Yimo didn't answer him. It was a good opportunity for him to finish speaking. Junjun. I'm sorry to have made you sad. I didn't mean to. I drank too much and said some nonsense. Please don't take it to heart, okay? It was still quiet inside. Gong-che saw that there was no one around and his handsome face was slightly red as he continued speaking. I don't like any noble girl. In my eyes, they can't even compare to a strand of your hair. Junjun, the one I like is you. This was the first time he had confessed in broad daylight. However, for happiness, what was shame? Gong-che said with a smile as he listened attentively to the movements inside. Junjun, I didn't marry you because of imperial father. I've thought about it. Perhaps I'm not cut out to be an emperor. How about I leave the capital with you? In the future, we can be an ordinary immortal couple. No one can ever separate us again. This was what Gong Che had come up with after much deliberation. In his previous life, he had obtained everything. The country, beautiful women, power, and wealth. However, he was willing to exchange it all for Gong Yimo. Even if he lost his life, he wouldn't regret it. Then, in this life, what was he greedy for? As long as Moa was around, he was willing to do anything. Gong Che had another plan in mind. That was, Gong Dai was in Beijing. In this life, Gong Ju was almost 18 years old. After coming out of the cold palace, in just a few years, he had become a frightening existence. His ambition was obvious, and he was aiming for the highest position. Most importantly, Gong Che's hand that was holding the lunchbox was a little wet. Most importantly, what if Moa fell in love with Gong Dai? He admitted that his abilities were not as good as Gong Dai's, and his looks were not as beautiful as Gong Dai's, therefore, he was afraid. He wanted to leave with Moa. If Moa said that she wanted to roam the world, they would roam the world. If Moa wanted to live a carefree life, they would live a carefree life. He knew that it was selfish of him to do this, but to hand over Moa and let her choose freely? It would be better to just kill him. Moa liked him. In this life, he would not give anyone else a chance. Murderous intent flashed across Gong Che's eyes, but it was quickly covered by joy and sweetness. Really, what was he thinking? Even if he didn't do anything, Moa would marry him in this life. What was he worried about? Moa liked him. However, Gong Yimo did not reply. This made Gong Che a little anxious. He knocked on the door again. Zhenzhen. There was no response. Gong Che frowned, but he still spoke in a very gentle voice. Zhenzhen, I'm coming in. Seeing that she did not speak, he pushed the door open. As Gong Che walked in, he smiled and said, Zhenzhen, I brought your favorite snacks. You haven't eaten properly these 2 days, right? Eat something first, okay? When Gong Che walked into the house full of anticipation, he realized that the windows were wide open. Where was Gong Yimo in the house? His expression changed immediately. Moa, he shouted, but there was no response. The gentle smile from just now disappeared. At this moment, his expression was as cold as the king of hell. The food box fell to the ground with a bang, but he did not seem to feel it. Moa was gone, but there was a letter on the table. He quickly walked forward and opened it. He realized that there were many words written on it, but they were all the same sentence. If you are heartless, I will leave. There were a few water stains on the paper. It was obvious that she was crying as she wrote. She was heartbroken. Gong Che was stunned and could not recover for a long time. What did Moa mean? She said that he did not like her. Because he was heartless, she decided to leave. She did not even give him a chance to explain. No, she could not leave. Gong Che's expression was tense. He grabbed the letter and ran out, bumping into Defu. Your Highness. Your Highness. Where are you going? How could Gong Che have time to pay attention to him? But when he saw him, Gong Che suddenly thought of something and hurriedly said, Prepare the carriage. I want to enter the palace. Quickly. Defu was frightened by the crown prince's behavior and hurriedly went to prepare the sedan. Gong Che was burning with anxiety. He only hoped that he could arrive in time. His marriage with Moa was bestowed by Imperial Father. In other words, even if Moa wanted to leave, she must get Imperial Father's permission. Moa had the golden token personally bestowed by Imperial Father. She must have entered the palace at this time. If she wanted to break off the engagement, he must stop her. Gong Che's guess was right. Gong Yimo really did enter the palace at this time. She used her lightness skills, coupled with her gold medallion, and was able to meet the emperor unimpeded. She explained the reason in a few words. Then, she very seriously expressed that she wanted to break off the engagement. Break off the engagement. In the throne room, Emperor Cheng was dressed in luxurious clothes. He looked strangely at the little girl below. Didn't she like Che very much? Why did she suddenly want to break off the marriage that she had painstakingly asked for? Is Che not good to you? This was the only reason Emperor Cheng could think of. Gong Yimo shook her head. This humble girl has figured it out. Her voice was slightly hoarse, But her attitude was firm. So what if she liked him? Now that she knew that Gong Che had no feelings for her, she would not force him. She lowered her head and said lightly, "Only a noble girl is worthy of the crown prince. I am just a commoner. I am not suitable. Your Majesty, please take back your order." Emperor Cheng touched his chin and felt that it was somewhat interesting. Since that's the case, we will have to ask Che what his intentions are. Gong Yimo suddenly shook her head. This humble girl wants to leave now. Your Majesty, you said that you would give me 3 promises. The first promise is that I asked to marry the crown prince. You agreed. This humble girl is very grateful. The second promise is that I want to break off the engagement. I know it's a little late to wake up now. If your Majesty is angry, I will accept your punishment. Now, I only ask that we have nothing to do with each other in the future. Emperor Cheng was somewhat displeased. You go back on your words like this. If I promise you, where will the royal family's face go? Gong Yimo lowered her head deeply. My marriage with the crown prince is based on the 3 promises given by your Majesty. In other words, your Majesty's promise is worth 1,000 gold. The weight is higher than the marriage granted. Emperor Cheng did not deny it and looked at her high and mighty. Little girl, what you said is not wrong, but how can I be sure that you will not use the 3rd promise to ask to marry the crown prince? No. Gong Yimo shook her head firmly, because I now intend to fulfill the 3rd promise from your Majesty. Chapter 842. Gong Cheng slightly raised his eyebrows. Oh? 3rd promise, what do you want? If what you say is reasonable, Jun will agree to it. Gong Yimo couldn't figure out Gong Cheng's thoughts. She only knew that this uncle's temperament was not bad. At that time, he almost mistakenly took drugs, but because she stopped him in time and saved him, Gong Cheng gave her 3 promises. Now, it's time to end it. Gong Yimo said in a deep voice, after all, the crown prince is still the crown prince, so after today's engagement, I hope that your Majesty can grant the crown prince a marriage. Only a real noble lady is worthy of him. This is my 3rd request. Gong Cheng couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This girl, although she had seen through it, she was also heartbroken by Che. Even so, she still wholeheartedly thought of Che, which was really touching. At first, Gong Cheng really wanted to punish her for going back on her words, but now this idea has faded. At least she didn't have the intention to harm others. Until the end, she still didn't forget to help others. It's really rare for a woman to have such a mind. In that case, you can get up. Jun will agree to it. Gong Yimo held back her tears and said in a low voice, "Thank you, Your Majesty." At this time, she received some news. He stepped forward and whispered in Gong Cheng's ear. Gong Cheng slightly raised his eyebrows and looked at Gong Yimo. I heard that Che also arrived at the entrance of the palace. Little girl, do you want to see him? Gong Yimo trembled all over, but she remembered that Gong Che wanted to see her at this time. Maybe it was also to ask the emperor to cancel the engagement. What's the point of seeing him? So she shook her head. I will leave now. From now on, I will never see the crown prince again. Gong Cheng was a little strange. Can Jin know why the little girl is so sad? His attitude was so firm. Gong Yimo looked up at him. Could it be that she wanted to say that the crown prince married her just because the emperor liked her? Could she say that the crown prince's heart already belonged to someone else, and that he was calling that woman's name in his dreams? Gong Cheng looked at Gong Yimo's pale little face and inexplicably felt a little distressed. He suppressed his curiosity and no longer asked. He just waved his hand. Okay, you can withdraw. Jin allows you two to never see each other again. Gong Yimo heard this and deeply bowed. Thank you, Your Majesty. So be it. Leave this troublesome place. She missed home. She missed her master. Along the way, Gong Che was burning with anxiety. At this time, he was very angry that he did not have any martial arts. If his Qinggong was outstanding, he would not have to wait so long. Moa, you have to wait for me. It's not what you think. Why would he want to break off the engagement? How could he not like her? He wanted to marry her even in his dreams. Once he entered the palace, Gong Che headed straight for Jiaoyang Hall. This was the first time he had run madly without caring about his image in the inner court of the palace, all for the sake of seeing Moa as soon as possible. As long as he could see her, everything would be fine. Gong Chei's heart was filled with hope. He hoped that everything would be in time. He really couldn't accept the fact that he had wrongly pushed away the woman he loved in his second life. When Gong Cheng heard that Gong Chei was in a hurry to seek an audience, he felt a little strange. His son had always been steady and diligent. He would always do well in whatever he was given to him. He was always very well behaved. Why was he so unusual today? Therefore, with this kind of curiosity, Emperor Gong Cheng generously received Gong Chei directly. Gong Chei strode in and actually forgot to salute. Instead, he looked around as if he was looking for someone. "How dare you? Your Highness the Crown Prince, why didn't you salute when you saw His Majesty?" Chang Shi's voice pulled Gong Chei back to his senses. "Imperial Father? Chang Shi? That's great. They're still alive. But now was not the time to care about this." Gong Chei asked anxiously while saluting. "Imperial Father, just now, did Moa Zhenzhen come to see you?" The emperor looked at him strangely. His son was indifferent and polite to everyone. It was the first time he saw him looking for someone so anxiously. Emperor Gong Cheng slowly said, "I saw her." Gong Chei's eyes lit up. Without waiting for Emperor Gong Cheng to shout, he stood up straight and looked at him expectantly. "Where is Moa? Imperial Father, will you allow us to see her?" Emperor Gong Cheng guessed that the little girl was almost at the palace gate, right? Anyway, he wasn't in a hurry, so he asked slowly, "You want to see her? You have to answer a few questions first." Gong Chei was very anxious. How could he have time to answer Emperor Gong Cheng's words now? But now was not the same as later. He was just a crown prince without external help and internal power. He could only ask urgently, "If I answer, can I see her?" Emperor Gong Cheng raised his eyebrows again. He really felt that this son was very strange. He was so irritable, as if the sky was about to fall. "That little girl wants to break off the engagement. What do you say?" Gong Chei's face turned pale when he heard this. He said almost without thinking, "You can't break off the engagement." He took a few steps forward and said quickly and nervously, "You can't break off the engagement, Imperial Father. This son likes her. This son won't break off the engagement even if I die." He wondered if Mo was hiding in the dark and eavesdropping. She shouldn't have left so quickly. Emperor Gong Cheng thought it was really interesting. The young couple who was about to get married, the one who paid the most ran over heartbroken and said that she wanted to break off the engagement, and the one who had been passive all this time suddenly said that she wouldn't break off the engagement even if she died. It was really interesting. Gong Chei saw that Emperor Gong Cheng didn't speak. He took a deep breath, adjusted his mood, and said word by word, "Imperial Father, this son was ignorant before and couldn't recognize my true feelings. Now, this son knows what I want. This son won't break off the engagement even if I die. In addition, this son wants to take my fiancée back." She seems to have misunderstood this son, but the wedding date can go on as before. Emperor Gong Cheng kept silent. This silence was simply driving Gong Chei crazy. Moa must still be in the palace. She wouldn't be so cruel as to not even give him a chance to explain. It wasn't until Gong Chei's forehead was covered with sweat that Emperor Gong Cheng said with a bad heart, "I'm afraid it won't be as you wish because you're too late. Previously, that girl came to me to withdraw the decree, and we allowed it." At that moment, Gong Chei almost fainted. He looked up at Emperor Gong Cheng in disbelief. He really didn't expect that he was so close to marrying Moa, but the heavens would play such a big joke on him. Moa really broke off the engagement. Why? She clearly didn't resist his kiss before, and she was angry and sad because of him. She clearly liked him. As if the blow wasn't enough, Emperor Gong Cheng said again, "She finally made a wish. We were grateful for her pure heart, so we allowed it." Gong Chei looked up at him in a daze, hoping to hear a favorable turn from Emperor Gong Cheng's mouth. He didn't expect Emperor Gong Cheng to say. "She said that as the crown prince, only the daughter of a noble family is worthy of you. We thought that we really owe you a lot over the years. Now that she's gone, we'll grant you a marriage of equal status." What do you think? Gong Che only felt a fishy taste in his throat, and he couldn't speak. Emperor Gong Cheng didn't notice his expression. Instead, he really thought of a suitable candidate. That daughter of the Su family has never been married. Although she's old, she's a famous beauty in the capital. Her father is the Marquis, so she's worthy to be your wife. Su family's daughter, Su Miaolan? Gong Che couldn't hold back and spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 843. Gong Che vomiting blood really frightened everyone. The smile on Gong Cheng's face instantly tightened, and Chang she subconsciously shouted. Quickly summoned the imperial physician, but at this time, Gong Che just wiped away his blood little by little. No need. His voice was hoarse and deeply dispirited. It seemed that after hearing what Gong Cheng just said, even his vitality was sucked away by more than half. Gong Cheng was anxious. His thick eyebrows tightened, and he angrily said, "What do you mean no need? Chang Shi, take the crown prince to the side hall. The imperial physician is here, let him quickly diagnose." Before he finished speaking, Gong Che suddenly knelt down on one knee. "What are you doing?" Gong Cheng frowned and looked at him strangely. Chang Shi was very perceptive and quickly withdrew with the other palace servants. "Imperial father, this son wants to know where Shongzhen is now." Gong Cheng saw that he wasn't worried about himself at all, but was still worried about that girl. He couldn't help but gloomily say, "She has already left. It's said that she went back to her sect." However, Gong Cheng didn't know where Gong Yimo's sect was, and he didn't know that this little girl he met by chance was his lost daughter. Knowing Gong Yimo's whereabouts, Gong Che was relieved. After the extreme pain, he calmed down. He thought very clearly, Moa had feelings for him, but she misunderstood him. In that case, he should go and get her back. He raised his head and looked directly at the emperor. "Imperial father, do you really feel indebted to this son for these 20 years? Gong Che looked up at him. After vomiting blood, his lips were pale, but his eyes were clear. Gong Cheng's heart trembled, but Gong Che's appearance at this time was really distressing. Thinking that this son was usually the most worry-free, and today's abnormal behavior had a reason, he couldn't help but soften his voice. "Ari, don't worry. We will make it up to you. The little girl is right. As the crown prince, you can't be so careless with your marriage. We will give you the marriage you deserve." When Gong Che heard his words, he slowly smiled. "Does that mean that if I'm not the crown prince, I can cancel this marriage?" Gong Sheng stared blankly for a moment, then became somewhat angry. "What are you if not the crown prince? Have you lost your mind?" Although he favored certain children, he had never thought of changing the crown prince. Gong Che pursed his lips. A trace of determination appeared on his handsome face as he kowtowed again. "Father, please remove me from the position of crown prince. Because I have an unmentionable illness, I cannot be the ruler." He had actually revealed the biggest secret of his body. It took Gong Sheng a while to digest the meaning of his words, but he still couldn't help but ask seriously, "What do you mean?" After Gong Che bowed, he slowly stood up. His earlier impatience gradually disappeared, and he became gentle and calm again. He spoke with a calm attitude. "I have an unmentionable illness. When the illness strikes, it's unbearable and easy to die suddenly. When Imperial Mother was still alive, in order to keep me as the crown prince, I did my best to conceal this secret. But now, I don't want to lie and deceive people anymore. Father, with my body, I can't be the crown prince." Gong Sheng was a little surprised. He didn't understand why Gong Che suddenly revealed his unmentionable illness at this time. Didn't he know that he would really lose the position of crown prince? "Why?" Gong Sheng frowned. Gong Che could have continued to hide it from everyone. Why did he have to say it himself? Gong Che smiled slowly. "I just saw it. What's there to fight for with my body? I only hope that Imperial Father will see that I have been well behaved for many years. Seeing that my Imperial Mother is dead and my family is in decline, perhaps I will keep my promise." Gong Sheng was stunned. He still didn't understand what was going on. Why was everyone so strange today? "What do you want?" Gong Che asked seriously. Gong Che coughed a few times, looking indescribably weak. My body is already an arrow at the end of its flight. I'm afraid I can't be filial by Imperial Father's side. I hope Imperial Father can send me to Yunding Mountain. I heard that Yunding Mountain gathers all the famous doctors in the world. I want to go there to recuperate and stay away from all the troubles. Gong Sheng saw that his expression didn't seem to be fake and couldn't help but be silent. At this time, the imperial physician came. Gong Sheng directly asked the imperial physician to diagnose in public. The imperial physician didn't know what was going on, but he still reached out to feel the crown prince's pulse. The crown prince was very cooperative. His expression was still, but there seemed to be light floating in his eyes. While waiting, Gong Sheng kept his eyes down and pondered. People like him couldn't just listen to what people said. He always had to figure out Gong Chei's intentions more thoroughly. But no matter what he thought, this matter was harmful to Gong Chei. What was Gong Chei planning? Soon, the imperial physician was stunned. He looked strangely at Gong Chei and carefully felt his pulse again. His expression was a little panicked. What should he do? He seemed to have discovered an incredible secret. How is it? Gong Sheng asked in a deep voice. The imperial physician's expression was tangled, hemming, and hawing. Gong Sheng was impatient and directly said, "There's no harm in saying it." The imperial physician then said, "Your Majesty, His Highness, seems to be congenitally deficient. He suffers from heart disease and is afraid of anger. It's easy to die suddenly." It was exactly the same as what Gong Chei said. Gong Sheng knew that the imperial physician wouldn't lie to him. So what Gong Chei said was true? He couldn't help but feel tangled. Could it be that Gong Chei really just felt that he couldn't be the crown prince, so he revealed this secret? But why didn't he say it earlier? He knew about Mount Yunding. It was quite famous among the people. More than 10 years ago, he even visited the palace. There didn't seem to be anything suspicious. So he could only ask Gong Chei, "Do you really want to go to Mount Yunding and stay away from worldly affairs?" Gong Chei nodded firmly, "Yes. Although this son wants to do his best for Daiyu State, this congenital illness can't be cured, so I can only stay away from disputes. Perhaps I can live for a few more years." A trace of sadness appeared between his eyebrows. "I've disappointed Imperial Father." Gong Sheng's heart clenched. He remembered that Gong Chei was already 22 years old, but he still hadn't recovered from his illness. It was clear that this congenital illness really couldn't be cured. Moreover, he was quite ostracized by his brothers in the imperial court. Perhaps this was why he had the idea of staying away from worldly affairs. He really shouldn't have doubted him like that. Chei, this child, really didn't have it easy. After pondering for a long time, Gong Sheng said, "How can the world's famous doctors compare to the imperial physicians in the palace? Chei, you should stay in the palace." Gong Chei didn't directly object. Instead, he thought about it and said, "Although the palace is good, there are people coming and going, and there are many disputes. This son has completely lost hope in my body. I just want to live like an ordinary person and walk around. I heard that Mount Yunding has beautiful scenery, so I want to take a look." A trace of sorrow appeared on his pale face. "This son has never asked you for anything. Just this once. This is a small wish. Imperial Father won't agree." What else could Gong Sheng say after he said so? In the end, he only said, "If your body recovers, come back. Daiyu State will always be your home." Gong Chei lowered his eyes and seemed to be very moved. "Yes, thank you, Imperial Father." Chapter 844. Momo. "Look at this flower, isn't it pretty?" Qiu Xingfeng, who was dressed in white and looked like a celestial, approached Gong Yimo and was pushed away by her. "Go away, don't disturb me." After a while, "Momo, the snow at the top of the mountain is so beautiful, let's go skiing. The skis you made last time are still here." Gong Yimo simply covered her head with a pillow. "I'm not going, it's annoying. Don't mind me." "Momo." Qiu Xingfeng bit his little paw. He was already 30 years old, but he acted like a 15 or 16-year-old boy when he acted cute. Unfortunately, Gong Yimo's face was covered by the soft pillow and she couldn't see it. Acting cute was useless. Qiu Xingfeng was defeated. For some reason, after Momo came back from the mountain, she became very disheartened. He asked her if she was bullied, but she didn't say anything. Although he was very happy that Momo came back, he was also unhappy that Momo was unhappy. Suddenly, Qiu Xingfeng seemed to have thought of something and excitedly pushed Gong Yimo. "Oh right, Momo. There's a guest on the mountain today." In the past, Gong Yimo would tell Qiu Xingfeng everything that happened on the mountain. However, Gong Yimo was in a bad mood recently and didn't like to listen to gossip. Instead, Qiu Xingfeng ran out to find things that she might be interested in to tell her. Gong Yimo was a little curious, but it was only for a moment. It must be someone who came to ask for medicine again. Boring. Qiu Xingfeng continued. "I heard that he's a high-ranking official. Anyway, many attendants followed him, but they were all chased away by him. However, he seems to have a good temper. Master is playing chess with him." Gong Yimo didn't care. Anyway, no one could disturb her time. Let her die of old age quietly like this. Momo. Qiu Xingfeng was even more frustrated. How could he make Momo more energetic? Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He heard that the newcomer's body wasn't good, so he wanted to learn some martial arts to strengthen his body. Master wanted him to teach him, but he only wanted Momo as his disciple. He didn't want this strange person to be his disciple. But if he could find a disciple for Momo, it wouldn't be bad. Qiu Xingfeng suddenly said, "Momo, wait for me. I'll find something fun for you. Wait for me." With that, he ran away like a gust of wind. Gong Yimo didn't take it to heart at all. What was fun for her master was boring for her. She should just continue to waste her time. However, her heart still ached faintly. Whenever she thought about how she had been defeated by a girl who had the same name as her, she felt sad. This was the first time she had fallen in love with someone. Annoying. Gong Che was a bastard. Qiu Xingfeng went directly to the Heavenly Gate residence where his master, Qiu Zhongchan, was at. He disturbed the two who were playing chess. The person who came was Gong Che. He had heard long ago that Moa had returned and was overjoyed. He was thinking about how to get close to her and resolve the misunderstanding, but before he could speak, he heard Qiu Xingfeng's voice. "Master, I've found a suitable person to teach this guest martial art." Qiu Zhongchan liked this young disciple very much. He smiled and said, "Why? You want to be lazy when I let you teach?" Actually, he had his own considerations. The other party had a strong background, and only someone as pure as Qiu Xingfeng would be able to befriend him. Only then would Qiu Xingfeng bring no harm to Mount Yunding. Moreover, wind and nature was the most gentle technique, and most suitable for Gong Che's body condition. Qiu Xingfeng's eyes widened. "No, I want Momo to teach him. Anyway, I'll teach Momo and Momo will teach him. Isn't that the same as me teaching him?" It had to be said that Qiu Xingfeng was very smart. Nonsense. Qiu Zhongchan smiled and shook his head. Moa couldn't stay still for a moment. Moreover, her identity was special. When he brought her into the mountain, he knew that she wasn't the emperor's biological daughter. However, this person in front of him was the emperor's biological son. Just as he was about to reject, Gong Che suddenly said, "Momo? Gong Yimo? Speaking of which, she's still my sister in name. Since that's the case, let her teach me. I'm very curious about her." This, Qiu Zhongchan still wanted to struggle, but Gong Che already couldn't wait to say it. "Where is she? I want to pay her a visit." Qiu Xingfeng was very happy when he saw that the matter was settled. He hurriedly pulled him away. "I'll take you there. Momo lives with me." With one sentence, Gong Che's smile froze on his face. He wanted to beat this master of Moa to death. Not only did he call her name so intimately, they even lived together. This was simply unbearable. Qiu Zhongchan saw that he couldn't stop him and frowned. Forget it, Moa was a smart girl. Nothing should happen to her. Should. Gong Yimo would never have thought that God would play her like this. Qiu Xingfeng ran into the courtyard and shouted loudly, "Momo, master has assigned you a task." He very cleverly pushed everything to his master because he knew that Momo would do her best to do what his master ordered. Gong Yimo was annoyed, but when she heard his words, she still weakly replied. What task? If it was simple, she would let Qiu Xingfeng do it for her. She secretly planned in her heart. Qiu Xingfeng walked through the door, revealing his white teeth and smiling brightly. Master found you a disciple. Disciple? Gong Yimo sat up in shock. It couldn't be what she thought, right? She didn't want to train a group of little radishes. But before she could ask, another person walked in from behind the door. That person was wearing a moonlight robe. His posture was tall and straight, and he wore a jade hat and brocade boots. His handsome face was even more eye-catching. Seeing her, the person's eyes suddenly brightened, and he couldn't suppress the smile on his face. I'm Gong Che. Greetings, Master. Gong Che's heart was pounding. That gentle attitude was as if it was the first time they met. Gong Yimo was stunned on the spot. This was Gong Che's twin brother? Qiu Xingfeng saw that Gong Yimo didn't object on the spot. In order to prevent her from flaring up, he quickly said, Momo, I'll leave your disciple here. You guys have a good time. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. You guys must have a good time. Before he finished speaking, he was already far away. After a long time, Gong Yimo, who was sitting in Cold Star Courtyard, let out a terrifying roar. Gong Che, you bastard. Why are you here? Gong Che revealed a flattering smile. My fiancée ran away. I'm here to look for her. Bastard, scumbag. Who said you're my fiancée? I already broke off the engagement. Gong Yimo glared at him fiercely, but her eyes were red. Gong Che blamed himself. Don't cry. Moa, I'm here. We'll never, bastard. You actually called me Moa. Gong Yimo was furious. At that moment, her hair stood up in anger. She kicked the door open and pointed angrily outside. Get lost. Get lost. Or I'll beat you to death. Chapter 845. It was only then that Gong Che understood why she was so angry. She had never told him what her name was. He kept calling her Moa, so she would naturally misunderstand. Gong Che secretly scolded himself for being stupid. Seeing that he was about to be pushed out, he hurriedly used both hands to block the door and said anxiously, Zhenzhen, Zhenzhen, aren't you Moa? I'm calling you. Gong Yimo was stunned, then she slammed the door hard. Who are you lying to? Even a ghost wouldn't believe you. Gong Che was anxious. He didn't know how to explain this matter, so he could only avoid the main point and dwell on the trivial. It's true. Moa, do you dare say that your name isn't Gong Yimo? Moa, I'm really calling you. Gong Yimo frowned as she pressed against the door. Could it be that Gong Che was really calling her name in his sleep? But this didn't make sense at all. After all, she had never told him her real name. Also, and the most important point, Gong Yimo leaned against the door, and a trace of misery flashed across her expression. Gong Che was always indifferent to her. He couldn't have called her name so affectionately. It was fine that she couldn't see through it in the past, but after calming down, she discovered many details. All of them indicated that Gong Che had married her because he had no choice. Perhaps after marrying him for a long time, he would fall in love with her, but at least not now. If that was the case, why was he still looking for her? Could it be that he had other motives? Thinking of how extraordinary she occasionally was, could it be that Gong Che had discovered her ability? So he was anxious when he saw her run away. Was he just using her? At the thought of this possibility, Gong Yimo's expression became very frightening. Don't lie to me. I don't believe you anymore. You don't like me at all. No. Gong Che opened his mouth. He loved her. He loved her for 6 years and was willing to give up everything for her. You don't love me. Her voice was very calm because of her terrible fantasy. If you loved me, you wouldn't have been so cold when I was sick. You wouldn't have judged me by your own standards. When you were sick, I could have taken care of you without any care for my clothes. But you only helped me get the imperial physician and treated me like a normal friend. Gong Che couldn't explain the details of the past at all. He just wanted to slap himself. Gong Yimo pressed her back against the door, and her eyes gradually turned red. You've always been indifferent to me. I've tried every means to please you, but your attitude is always the same. Moa, Gong Che really wanted to hold her in his arms and tell her his feelings loudly. How could she misunderstand him like this and misunderstand him more and more? It's all my fault. Open the door and I'll tell you everything, okay? What else is there to say? Gong Che suddenly became smart. Don't you want to know why my attitude changed so much? Why was I so cold to you back then? They all had their own difficulties. Open the door and I'll tell you, okay? Gong Yimo hesitated, and finally made up her mind. Whatever you want to say, you can say it outside. Moa, Gong Che panicked. His tone suddenly became very sad. You said you like me, but why didn't you give me a chance to explain? I specially came to Yun Ding Mountain. Why didn't you give me a chance to speak? That lingering and painful voice sounded as if it was a huge mistake for her not to open the door. Gong Yimo couldn't help but soften. She thought, since the other party didn't know martial arts, what was she afraid of? So she loosened her grip and Gong Che pushed the door open again. Gong Yimo didn't look at him, and only said coldly, say whatever you want to say. But the moment she finished speaking, Gong Che pulled her into his arms. Gong Yimo was shocked. When she looked up, her lips were sucked on by the other party. Gong Yimo was stunned for a moment, and quickly resisted. But she didn't use any internal energy. Gong Che pressed her against the door and kissed her deeply. Their breaths intertwined. Gong Yimo let out a whimper, but in the end, she didn't push him away. Gong Che was overjoyed. He quickly hugged the other party's soft body tightly, and then gently and carefully traced her lips, savoring her sweetness. Gong Che originally had a lot to say to explain, but the moment he saw her, he didn't want to think about anything else. He just wanted to kiss her. They hadn't seen each other for more than 10 days. He missed her so much. He loved her so much. How could one go to the ends of the world and down to the Yellow Springs be something that could be explained in a few words? Only by letting her feel it for herself. And when he felt that Moa was gradually not resisting, Gong Che was so excited that his whole body went numb. He just wanted to hug her and kiss her until the end of time. Looking at her gradually watery and helpless eyes, those lightly trembling eyelashes made him crazily ravage her mouth without anyone teaching him how to do it. His hands tightened, as if he couldn't wait to merge into his arms. After the long kiss ended, both of them had rosy cheeks and were panting. Gong Che's gentle and handsome face was like a moisturized jade, emitting a seductive glow. His body was still tightly pressing Gong Yimo against the door, leaving no gap. After a while, he finally caught his breath and said hoarsely in her ear, "What do you want to ask? I'll answer you, but you have to hear me out, okay?" Gong Yimo gradually came back to her senses. When she thought about how she was forcefully kissed, and how it was such a kiss, her cheeks flushed red. She glared at Gong Che, but she didn't know that her gaze was coquettish and seductive. Gong Che couldn't hold it in. He lowered his head and kissed her again. That blissful sweetness made him dizzy, as if he was in a dream. Moa didn't exclude his kiss. Moa didn't even resist being in his arms. The intimacy he wanted didn't depend on stealing or snatching. This time, Moa was his. Although he had driven her away in anger, it didn't matter. He was here. "Moa, you can't run away. I won't let you run away again." As the kiss deepened, Gong Che's eyes turned dark red. This was a sign of his arousal. He didn't know it himself, but it pulled Gong Yimo back from her daze. "Your eyes." She pushed Gong Che away for a while. When he heard this, his thin lips curled up slightly. At this moment, he was no longer the depressed crown prince, but the person who was praised by future generations and almost became the emperor. His face was even more handsome because of his confidence. That handsomeness was even more seductive because of his dark red eyes. He had always been gentle and elegant, but when he was in front of her, it was as if he had unknowingly turned into a greedy demon. "My eyes turned red." His voice was gentle and hoarse, but for some reason, it sounded a little demonic at this moment. Gong Yimo nodded and looked at him strangely. Gong Che's smile was actually so beautiful that it could turn all living things upside down. "Do you know why they turned red?" Gong Yimo was mesmerized by his radiant face and shook her head blankly. Her appearance pleased Gong Che. Moa liked his face. How nice. Because I want you. His lowered voice was filled with endless ambiguity and hints. Chapter 846. Gong Yimo didn't understand at first, but after she did, she was embarrassed. Gong Che quickly looked into her eyes and coaxed, "But don't worry, before we get married, I won't touch you." "But, Moa, I love you so much. Don't make me wait for too long, okay?" Those explicit words of love made Gong Yimo's scalp tingle. A person who was originally very cold and gentle, like a big brother next door, suddenly became so gentle and domineering. The contrast was too big. However, when Gong Che said those words, his expression was extremely serious. Those demonic red eyes stared at her without blinking, as if he was afraid that she would run away. Gong Yimo couldn't help but ask, "Then why were you so cold to me in the past?" After she came back, there was only one answer, and that was that Gong Che didn't like her. But now, she suddenly had a trace of hope, and wanted to hear his explanation. Gong Che carefully hugged her waist. Hearing her words, the corners of his mouth lifted into a smile, but there was also a hint of bitterness. "Because in the past, I was stupid and couldn't recognize my own feelings." Gong Yimo didn't believe him and pouted. Gong Che hurriedly said, "Let me finish." He gently stroked her hair and said slowly and seriously, "Because in the past, my heart was higher than the sky. I always thought that as the crown prince, even if I didn't have any external help or internal power, I was still the pride of the heavens. How could I marry a woman with no background? So, even if you were very good and very cute, I still had prejudice against you." Gong Yimo was a little angry when she heard that, but before she could get angry, Gong Che lowered his head, closed his eyes and kissed her forehead very gently. "But, I've already been punished, Moa." The pain in his voice made Gong Yimo unable to get angry. When she looked up, she found that the affection in his eyes was like a net, tightly covering her, not giving her any chance to breathe. "It was only when you left me that I realized what I had lost. Moa, I'm sorry for my arrogance. I regret that I only realized my feelings for you so late. That's why I'm here. Can you please give me another chance?" Gong Che's words weren't fake. He understood himself, and naturally understood what the Gong Che of this world was thinking. He just couldn't see through it. In fact, how could he not like Moa? She was so beautiful, so quick-witted, so smart. He just thought that he shouldn't like a commoner, no matter how outstanding she was. These words, Gong Che, completely put. He didn't want to lie, and he didn't want to lose her, so he'd tell the truth and ask for her forgiveness. Or with his current ability, he could come up with more perfect. With his current tea, he could come up with more perfect lies. Gong Yimo was stunned. She didn't think that Gong Che would say something like that. She understood Gong Che. She knew that he was a person who loved his reputation and cared a lot about his dignity. Gong Yimo had never thought that he would admit that he was arrogant and that his heart was higher than the sky just to get her forgiveness. But it was also inexplicably moving. She thought about it and couldn't help but ask, "I didn't tell you my name, how did you know? Was the person you called when you were unconscious really me?" Gong Yimo was very suspicious. Gong Che was a little annoyed. He didn't think that Moa would be so angry because he called her name when he was unconscious. What a big mistake. "It's a long story, but I can swear that the person I called in my dreams was definitely your name." His heart ached. He didn't think that there would be a day when he would have to prove his sincerity. His entire heart was with Moa. How was he going to prove it? He hugged her tightly. "I really love you. Will you marry me?" "When you weren't here, on the way to find you, I thought of countless possibilities. I really can't imagine that if I lost you because of this, what meaning would there be for me to live?" Gong Yimo didn't think that there would be a day when she would hear Gong Che say this. She was stunned for a while before she gave a proud snort. "Don't you want to be a good crown prince? How is it meaningless without me?" She admitted that she was thinking too much, but her tone was already much better. Gong Che trembled slightly as he kissed the hair by her ear. A complicated look flashed through his eyes. She would never understand that he waited for her to look back once, but it never happened even after an entire lifetime. She also wouldn't understand that he loved her so much that he was willing to use his country and his life to exchange for her. He wouldn't be a good emperor if he was like this. I'm no longer the crown prince. Gong Yimo was shocked and quickly pushed him away. She looked at him and anxiously asked, "What's going on here?" It couldn't be that she had angered the emperor by breaking off the engagement, and he was taking revenge on her, right? Gong Che saw that she was nervous and smiled as he told her this. "Don't worry, it has nothing to do with you. I have a hidden illness. When I came, I told Imperial Father that I can't be the ruler due to my illness, so Imperial Father allowed me to leave and come here to recuperate." Hidden illness? Gong Yimo was very smart. It has something to do with your eyes. Why are you so silly? Didn't you always want to be a good emperor? Why did you suddenly tell the emperor about this? She was a little flustered, but it made Gong Che's eyes flash with a gentle light. Finally, he reached out and pinched her nose. "Because of you he revealed a gentle and sweet smile. There was even a trace of red in his eyes. It was as if she was the only one in the world. My wife ran away. I wanted to chase after her, but the crown prince can't leave the capital, so I could only do this." His tone really did not sound like he was wronged. Gong Yimo did not believe him and hammered him. She did not believe that Gong Che loved her to the point of giving up his country. "If you keep talking glibly, I won't be polite anymore." She was flustered by Gong Che's teasing. She waved her little fist and pretended to be fierce as she spoke. Gong Che quickly adjusted his expression. He slightly lowered his head and seriously looked at her as he spoke. "Moa, don't you want to travel the world and be a wanderer? You can sacrifice your wish to be by my side, so why can't I give up being the crown prince and wander the world with you?" His tone was too serious, making it hard for anyone to doubt him. But was that possible? He was someone who was very cold to you before, but he suddenly had deep feelings for you. Gong Yimo revealed a confused expression. Gong Che sighed in his heart, but he still lovingly touched her face. "Moa, don't think too much. Time will reveal a person's heart. You can test me, right? I will continue to live here and be your disciple. I'll leave the following days to Master to take care of me." After saying this, he did not wait for Gong Yimo's reply as he pulled her into his embrace and gently kissed her lips. She was simply too alluring, always making him impulsive. When he was intimate with her, it was like he had been shocked by electricity. There was a numb feeling that moved through his entire body. That numb feeling made his entire body tremble, but he did not want to leave at all. Instead, he wanted more. Chapter 847. Gong Yimo was dizzy from his kiss and accidentally opened her mouth, allowing him to deepen the kiss. The sound of water flowing could be heard from the room. This kind of kiss was unprecedented for both of them. It was novel and exciting. Gong Che was so excited that he wanted to tear her apart and eat her up. She was so sweet, so beautiful, so fragrant. She didn't reject him at all. This was a scene that he had dreamed of. He didn't have to wait for her to fall asleep while she was drunk. He was kissing her when she was sober, and she accepted it. Was there anything more blissful than this? Gong Che's kiss became more and more urgent, causing Gong Yimo to moan helplessly. However, that moan was like a seductive flame that instantly ignited the two of them. The two of them hugged and kissed tightly. They were inseparable. Gong Che had overestimated his self-control as an old virgin in front of the woman he loved. Especially since Moa had always rejected him in the past. Suddenly, she allowed him to get close to her. This dreamlike bliss drove him crazy. His eyes were bloodshot, and his breathing became rapid. His hands hugged Gong Yimo tightly, as if he was afraid that she would run away. Gong Yimo felt the other party's firmness. She blinked and suddenly pushed him away in embarrassment. Gong Che was in a daze. After being pushed away, his first reaction was fear. He hurriedly asked, "What's wrong, Moa? You don't like it when I kiss you? Did I do something wrong?" Gong Yimo gave him a hard stare. This guy, he's too enthusiastic. However, seeing that he didn't seem to be pretending, Gong Yimo's heart was filled with sweetness. She snorted, "You lecher. Didn't you say that you were going to give me a test of time? Look at you, your eyes are red again. Gong Che then realized that he had been too impatient. He could only blame her for being so sweet that it drove him crazy. How could he have any self-control when it came to her? Gong Che couldn't bear to part with her, so he continued to hug her and act coquettishly. Moa, I just missed you too much. Don't be angry. Can you let me hug you again? Gong Yimo bit her lip and pushed him away firmly. If I let you carry me again, you'll be carrying me to the bed. Let me tell you, you better behave yourself on Mount Yun Ding. I will supervise you. With that, she quickly opened the door with a red face and slipped away like a gust of wind. Gong Che's arms were suddenly empty, which made him feel very uncomfortable. He was impatient. As long as Moa was not his, he was afraid that someone would snatch her away. He wished he could hug her in his arms 24 hours a day, but when he thought about how Moa liked him, he felt a little relieved. He just licked his swollen lips in embarrassment, and his heart was as sweet as honey. Moa forgave him. He had to strike while the iron was hot and get his wife back. Thus, Gong Che began his blissful pursuit of his wife. But soon, he found his biggest obstacle. Because she understood Gong Che's physical condition, Gong Yimo seriously prepared a series of fitness programs for him, including food therapy and medicinal baths. Of course, the task of food therapy and medicinal baths fell on Qiu Xingfeng, which made him very unhappy. Momo didn't care about him anymore. Momo's gaze was on that outsider. Damn it, this guy is here to snatch Momo. As Gong Yimo and Gong Che's relationship got better, Qiu Xingfeng's sense of crisis also got heavier. Finally, when he found that bold outsider kissed Momo, Qiu Xingfeng's little universe exploded. Momo, let's go catch fireflies. Gong Yimo was reading a book. Hearing this, she raised her head and frowned slightly. But what should we do? I'm reading a medical book. Qiu Xingfeng was angry. His cheeks were puffed up with anger. Momo had never read medical books before. Then he pursed his lips and showed an aggrieved expression. Momo doesn't like me anymore. Momo only plays with that outsider and doesn't play with me anymore. Momo is a bad person. Gong Yimo was stunned. After all, she had been with Qiu Xingfeng for many years and their relationship was very deep. Seeing that Qiu Xingfeng was sad, she quickly said, "All right. Stop pretending, let's go catch fireflies. What are you reading for?" She knew in her heart that medical skills were extensive and profound. It wasn't something that she could use after reading for a while. Moreover, her master was very important and she didn't want her master to be sad. Therefore, the two of them happily went up the mountain to catch fireflies. Gong Che was writing a letter in his room. Although he wasn't the crown prince anymore, Gong Che knew that he couldn't be powerless. Otherwise, when the battle of the princes officially started, it would inevitably affect him. At that time, Moa would be in a very dangerous situation. He must have the strength to protect her. Therefore, Gong Che began to use his own strength based on his experience in his previous life. Fortunately, after he took the initiative to give up the position of crown prince, his imperial father gave him a lot of men and horses. Now, they could be put to good use. After carefully considering his plan, Gong Che felt that there were no flaws. Only then did he remember that he hadn't asked Moa for a goodnight kiss. This was a good opportunity to deepen their relationship. Gong Che moved his sore shoulders and personally made some snacks. Then, he walked towards the Cold Star courtyard where Gong Yimo was. These snacks were made by himself when he had nothing to do in his previous life. He didn't like to eat sweets, but Moa liked them. So in his previous life, whenever he crazily missed her, he would make snacks. Unfortunately, at that time, she didn't belong to him, so she didn't taste the snacks he made. He occasionally ate the food he made. He didn't know if there was a problem with his taste buds. Although it was sweet, it tasted bitter. The bitterness spread to his heart and his entire mouth became numb. But now, it was different. Whatever Moa liked to eat, he would make it. Every time, Moa would proudly ask him to put it down and then eat it clean. He was satisfied from the bottom of his heart and ran to the kitchen even more frequently. But when he carried the food box to Moa's place, He found that she wasn't there. Gong Che felt a little strange. It was so late, where did she go? Coincidentally, a junior brother saw her and kindly told him, "Young master, are you here to look for senior sister?" Senior sister and martial uncle went to the mountain to play. They will probably come back tomorrow morning. This is a common thing. If you are not in a hurry, you can come back tomorrow. After saying that, the junior brother yawned and left. He inadvertently provoked the other party and then hid his achievements and fame. Gong Che's face turned pale. What did he hear? Mo and Qiu Xingfeng went to the mountain to play. And they played for the whole night. And it was a common thing. Qiu Xingfeng was already 30 years old, but he still knew how to act cute and had an innocent face. He also secretly targeted him from time to time. Gong Che frowned. This would be his biggest rival on the road to his wife. Gong Che thought for a while and brought the secret guards and the food box to the mountain. He wanted to see how Qiu Xingfeng would not let go of Mo with him. Mo was his. Everyone who wanted to take his wife could only step over his dead body. Chapter 848. The full moon hung low in the sky. It was so close that it seemed like one could reach out and grab it. Under the moonlight, there were countless fireflies shuttling through the tall grass. Qiu Xingfeng used his Qing Gong and caught a bunch of fireflies. He placed them into a woven lantern, and a firefly lantern was completed. Gong Yimo sighed and sat at the side, thinking about life. Qiu Xingfeng handed the completed lantern to her and smiled brightly. Come. Momo, this is for you. Gong Yimo couldn't help but smile. Thank you, master. The faint fluorescent light and moonlight shone on Gong Yimo's face, dispelling the worry between her brows. Qiu Xingfeng saw that she liked it and was relieved. He felt that the most important person in Momo's heart was still him. That outsider was nothing. Who knew that Gong Yimo suddenly said something? Master, do you think Gong Che is really good to me? Recently, Gong Che had been behaving well, as if he was a different person. She was happy but also felt a little guilty. She felt that his good feelings towards her came out of nowhere. Qiu Xingfeng was unhappy when Momo suddenly mentioned that annoying person. He's not as good to you as I am. Gong Yimo laughed. Yes, master is the best. But Qiu Xingfeng was still not satisfied. He rolled his eyes and suddenly kissed her on the cheek. Actually, to Qiu Xingfeng, his kiss was without any desire. He just felt that since Gong Che kissed Mo he wanted to kiss her too. But Gong Yimo was stunned. Because this was the first time Qiu Xingfeng did this. After Qiu Xingfeng kissed her, he smacked his lips and snorted proudly. It's nothing. If he can kiss, I can kiss too. Gong Yimo was speechless. Although she knew that Qiu Xingfeng was just a child who liked to compare, she still hit him hard. But this scene in Gong Che's eyes was like a bolt from the blue. He saw Qiu Xingfeng kiss Moa from afar. For the first time, he hated his good eyesight. In fact, he knew that Qiu Xingfeng had a childish mentality, and he also knew that Moa only saw him as a teacher. But seeing them so close, the jealousy in his heart instantly overturned. Gong Che felt that his whole body was soaked in vinegar. Even the secret guards could feel the thick sourness of his highness. But then again, no man would be able to remain calm after seeing such a scene. Killing intent flashed in Gong Che's eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He couldn't be like this. Their relationship was already very good, and he shouldn't be so possessive. Otherwise, it would scare Moa. After mentally preparing himself, he dismissed the shadow guard and walked over. As soon as Qiu Xingfeng saw Gong Che, he immediately became alert. Gong Yimo also felt strange seeing Gong Che. Usually, he would be asleep at this time. What are you doing here? Qiu Xingfeng asked rudely. Gong Che had already calmed down. But when he looked at Qiu Xingfeng, his eyes still narrowed. Finally, he revealed a gentle smile like a neighbor's brother. I'm here to deliver supper to Moa. Gong Yimo's eyes brightened. Gong Che's cooking was very much to her taste. But she didn't know when he learned to cook. Qiu Xingfeng saw that Gong Che successfully squeezed between him and Moa, and was very unhappy. He saw the snacks that the other took out and said disdainfully, Isn't it just a few snacks? This is where Momo and I catch fireflies. You don't know how to catch fireflies, so why are you here? Teacher. Gong Yimo glared at her teacher. Gong Che's health wasn't good, and he didn't know martial arts. Wasn't this provoking? Qiu Xingfeng felt wronged. Momo was actually scolding him for this outsider. Gong Che acted as if he didn't hear anything. He calmly took out the snacks and arranged them one by one. Then, he pretended to say casually, "Little teacher, I heard from Daoist Qiu yesterday that his winter-autumn scripture disappeared. I think I saw it at your place before." Qiu Xingfeng instantly exploded. Winter-autumn scripture? Didn't he destroy the corpse and erase the evidence? How did he know it was at his place? If he told his teacher, he would be in trouble. That scripture was a rare one, but he dropped it in the water. He stuttered, "I don't know what you're talking about." "What scripture?" "Me. I'm going to sleep. Good night, Momo." Then, as if afraid that Gong Che would say something else, he quickly slipped away. Gong Che was secretly pleased. He was just a child, and he wanted to fight with him. Gong Yimo chuckled, "Why are you so bad?" Teacher is very timid. He's most afraid of Daoist Qiu's ruler. Gong Che blinked innocently, "I'm also very timid." Gong Yimo was speechless, but she saw him say seriously, "When I think that Moa might like someone else, I'm so scared that I can't sleep at night." "Momo, you can't scare me like this." Gong Yimo thought for a moment and knew who he was talking about. She was confused. "What nonsense are you talking about? Teacher is my family." Gong Yimo glared at him, but saw him looking at her affectionately. Her face suddenly turned red. "Also, who is the person you like?" Annoying. Gong Che's skin was definitely thick enough to withstand the test. He hurriedly came over and said seriously, "You." His voice was a bit low, "Although I know that you only have family for Qiu Xingfeng, but he's handsome, simple, and strong in martial arts. My body is weak and I don't know martial arts. Naturally, I feel inferior and not worthy of you." Gong Yimo didn't expect him to be so direct, but seeing the uneasiness in his eyes, her heart couldn't help but soften. "You're not as bad as you say." Gong Che heard this and his eyes brightened. "So Moa still likes me, hmm? You're crazy." Gong Yimo didn't want to talk to him and turned her head away. But her eyes were flickering, and she was very shy. Gong Che's heart moved. He picked up a piece of red bean cake and put it in her mouth, saying softly, "Come, Mo-er. I made this for you personally. It doesn't matter if I hate it. It didn't offend you. Just give me some face and eat a little more, hmm?" Gong Yimo's scalp went numb from his raised hem. She didn't know why, but Gong Che was clearly gentle and refined, but she always felt that he was a bit domineering. Just like now, she had no choice but to take a small bite. Gong Che's gaze instantly became gentle. Then he put the remaining piece into his mouth and narrowed his eyes. It seemed like there was nothing wrong with his taste buds. The desserts he made were clearly sweet and not bitter. The night was dark and the mountains were high. There was no one around, and under such a beautiful night sky, a man and a woman alone. Gong Yimo felt a bit awkward. While eating the desserts, she secretly moved to the side. But how could her every move hide from Gong Che, who was closely following her? Gong Che blinked and suddenly reached out his hand to release all the fireflies in the lantern. Gong Yimo looked at him strangely, but she saw that he had already stood up. Under the moonlight, his figure was tall, like an immortal who was about to fly away, but his hand stubbornly held onto the lantern. "Although I don't know martial arts, if you like fireflies, I can catch them." Chapter 849. Before Gong Yimo could say anything, Gong Che took the lantern and ran into the haystack. It looked like he was really going to make another firefly lantern for Gong Yimo. If Qiu Xingfeng used Qinggong to catch them, he could catch 20 to 30 in a few minutes. That would be enough. But for Gong Che, the process was very difficult. He had to concentrate and be very careful before he could catch one. Gong Yimo looked at him and suddenly felt like laughing. The haze that had been pressing on her body before dispersed bit by bit. Looking at Gong Che clumsily catching fireflies for her, She felt good as she ate the snacks. Gong Che completely threw away his image and focused on catching fireflies for Gong Yimo. He only had one thought in his mind. As long as it was what she wanted, he could do it well. When he finally caught 30 fireflies, enough to fill the lantern, he was already sweating profusely. Gong Che tried his best to adjust his breathing and tidied up his crown. Only then did he get out of the haystack and excitedly ask for credit. A long time had passed. Gong Yimo had already finished all the snacks that Gong Che brought. Seeing the lantern in front of her, she narrowed her eyes and smiled slightly. "Moa, for you." Gong Che's expression was very calm and he looked very light. Unfortunately, his silk coat had already been scratched by the leaves and his hair was a bit messy. He looked very different from his previous immortal-like appearance. But he still didn't know it. Gong Yimo stood up and took the lantern in his hand. After Gong Che gave the lantern to her, he quickly put away his hand, trying not to let Gong Yimo see the scratches on his hand. Really, if he couldn't even do such a small thing, how could Moa dislike him? Gong Yimo smiled slowly. "This is for me." Gong Che looked up and only felt that her face was shockingly beautiful under the fluorescent light. After a long while, he finally regained his senses and nodded. Who knew that as soon as he nodded, Gong Yimo's hand loosened, and the lantern's gauze opened, and all the fireflies flew out. While Gong Che was still in a daze, the fireflies had already run away. Gong Yimo hugged the empty lantern and looked at him. She handed the lantern back to him innocently and asked softly, "Can you help me catch it again?" Gong Che looked at her deeply. Without another word, he took the lantern and went into the bushes. Gong Yimo smiled. "Aren't you angry?" As the Crown Prince, especially the Crown Prince who failed to achieve his goals, Gong Che's heart was fragile and sensitive. But the Gong Che in front of her, she deliberately tormented him, but he didn't say a word. Was it because their feelings were too deep, or because his ambitions were too great? But what did she have that was worth him giving up his dignity and trying to please her again and again? Perhaps it was because the first time was unfamiliar, but this time, Gong Che's speed was very fast. When he returned in front of Gong Yimo, panting, his hair crown was a little crooked. His white silk robe was a terrible sight, but his eyes were shockingly bright. "Moa! For you." He firmly handed the lantern in his hand to her again. Gong Yimo took it with a playful expression. Then, without saying a word, she opened the gauze. Specks of fluorescent light flew out from between the two of them. Gong Che looked at her in astonishment. Gong Yimo guessed in her heart. This time, he should be angry, right? Who knew that Gong Che only took the lantern from her hand and said softly and seriously, "I'll catch more for you." When he said this, there wasn't a hint of anger or unwillingness. He just hurriedly turned around to catch the insects. He even wondered if he had done something wrong to make Moa unhappy. Who knew that when he turned around, Gong Yimo hugged him from behind. This should be the first time she hugged him on her own initiative in both their lives. Gong Che's heart shook. He was stunned on the spot. He had been looking forward to this day even in his dreams, but when this day really came, he felt like he was in a dream. The bright moon hung high in the sky and the fluorescent light danced in the air. He couldn't really be dreaming, right? Gong Yimo rested her head on Gong Che's back and rubbed it gently. She successfully felt Gong Che's body tense up. She felt that it was very fun. She used a little strength in her hand and turned Gong Che around to face her. The two of them stood very close to each other. Gong Che could almost see Gong Yimo's eyelashes clearly through the moonlight. He saw Gong Yimo tiptoe slightly and reach out to pull out the jade hairpin on his head. Without the support of the jade hairpin, his loose hair fell apart with the removal of the jade hairpin. In the blink of an eye, his black hair fell down and gently fluttered in the night wind. Gong Che blinked in confusion. Originally, in order to maintain the image of a crown prince, he had always dressed very strictly, wishing that there wasn't a single wrinkle on his clothes. Therefore, he exuded a sense of abstinence from the inside out. But now, his outer clothes were torn and his black hair was fluttering. That gentle and handsome face suddenly revealed a demonic aura. Gong Yimo liked his current appearance. The two of them were very close to each other. Gong Che could smell the sweetness on Gong Yimo's body, and Gong Yimo could also smell the medicinal fragrance on Gong Che's body. As their breathing got closer, the air was filled with an ambiguous aura. Gong Che's heart was beating very fast. Just when he thought that Gong Yimo was going to kiss him, Gong Yimo suddenly said something. "You said that when you're aroused, your eyes turn red." She smiled mischievously. "How about this? If your eyes turn red right now, I'll believe that you like me." As soon as her voice fell, Gong Che didn't understand what she meant. His body was bewitched as he hugged Gong Yimo's waist. And in the next second, after he understood Gong Yimo's meaning, he happily closed his eyes and forcefully sucked on her alluring red lips. This time, Gong Yimo was extremely cooperative and licked him back. Who knew that when she touched him, Gong Che was shocked and his eyes suddenly opened. Other than ecstasy, there was a strange dark red color that couldn't be hidden under the moonlight. He was aroused with just a kiss. Gong Yimo suddenly smiled and hugged his neck to fiercely kiss him. "Do you really like me?" Gong Yimo kept taking the initiative, which aroused Gong Che's sense of shame. His face flushed red, and he said hoarsely, He said I for a long time, and in the end, he sighed softly in Gong Yimo's ear. "I don't like you enough. I love you very much, very much." Gong Yimo proudly pinched his body that was stiff due to nervousness and impulse and smiled. "Very much. How much do you love me?" "That's." Gong Che's hands around her waist gradually tightened, and his chin rubbed against her shoulder impatiently. "I love you very much. You're more important than the country, than power and status, than everything, even more important than my life. Do you know? To have the chance to love you, I'm so happy that it's like a dream." Words of love sounded sweet, but because Gong Che's every word came from the bottom of his heart, Gong Yimo didn't feel mushy when she heard it. Instead, she felt her heart heat up. She thought that although Gong Che had suddenly changed, he was still him, and feelings wouldn't lie. She should believe him. Chapter 850. Just like that, Gong Che smoothly obtained his fiancée's approval. Even in his dreams, he had a smile on his face, as if it was inconceivable. Because she had decided to be together with Gong Che, Gong Yimo forcefully rejected Gong Che's overly intimate request. At most, they could only kiss, and it could only be a light taste. As a result, the two's marriage was postponed. Because Gong Che was congenitally deficient, she was afraid that Gong Che would be agitated and cause some terrible consequences. Gong Che wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He repeatedly expressed that his body was not that delicate. Not only could he kiss, but he could also do more. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows in surprise. "So you're saying that something has happened between you and another woman?" Gong Che quickly shook his head. In all honesty, other than being forced to marry Su Miaolan, he did not have any involvement with any other woman. Even if Su Miaolan stripped naked and stood in front of him, he would not have any reaction. However, this matter could not be known by Moa. Otherwise, if Moa got angry, he would have nowhere to cry. Gong Yimo saw him shake his head and smiled wickedly. "Then on what basis do you say that your body can withstand sex? On what basis? Are you going to joke about your body?" Gong Che's gentle and handsome face cracked. What could he say to prove that his body was not in the way? Unfortunately, Gong Yimo did not listen to his explanations. If she said no, then no. It was fine if she did not know before, but now that she knew that his body was ill, how could she allow him to run amok? Moreover, he had been unconscious for 3 days. It was very likely that it was because he was anxious. At that time, the imperial physician said that his illness was dangerous. It was clear that he could not be careless. Gong Che had no choice but to order his men to hurry up and find the water cloud grass. He knew that his illness could be cured with the water cloud grass. Moreover, there were famous doctors on Mount Yunding. He only needed to find the water cloud grass and give the people on Mount Yunding a hint. However, he didn't know if it was a matter of luck, but the fire cloud grass that Qiu Zhongchan needed could always be bought. Although it cost a lot of money, the water cloud grass that he wanted was nowhere to be found. In a flash, a year had passed. Gong Che finally felt that something was amiss. However, in the past year, his assets had become very strong. In his previous life, He had used ships to make money, so he understood the logistics industry very well. Moreover, he had a more advanced shipbuilding concept. His ships could carry more goods and more people at a time. He had also used his authority to monopolize the logistics of a section of the Yangtze River. In the past year, his business had been doing well, but under such circumstances, he still couldn't buy the water cloud grass. It could only be said that he had been targeted, and that person, he knew who it was. Gong Che frowned slightly. He ordered his men to continue looking for the water cloud grass. He didn't believe that that person would continue to pester him. However, the fear in his heart couldn't lie. Gong Che suddenly had a strong urge to see Gong Yimo. When he hurriedly went to look for her, he found that Gong Yimo was sparring with Qiu Xingfeng in the Tai Chi dojo. Her confident posture made her sword moves clean and neat. The current her didn't experience any hardships, so she was a little different from the future her. However, Gong Che loved her so much. He selfishly felt that her current state was better. She didn't have to bear so much, and she didn't have so many missions and responsibilities. Her current happiness was simple and easy to satisfy. That was enough. He loved her as a person. He loved her no matter what she looked like. Seeing Gong Che coming, his white robe fluttering in the wind, his elegant and handsome appearance gave off a feeling of a jade-like stranger, a peerless young master. Many senior and junior sisters who practiced martial arts revealed infatuated expressions. However, the object of their infatuation could only be seen by one person. Gong Yimo was taking a break. Gong Che hurriedly passed over a water bottle. Such gentleness and consideration really made others envious. Qiu Xingfeng was dissatisfied. He stretched out his hand towards Gong Che. Momo is your master. I am your master's master. Why did you only prepare water for your master, but not for your master's master? Gong Che glanced at him. Seeing that this person could be considered his future brother-in-law, he stretched out his hand and asked the shadow guard to pass him a bottle of water. He also took the opportunity to pull Gong Yimo into the forest, because he had something to say. The sun shone down. The two held hands, just like an ordinary couple. What's wrong? Gong Yimo smiled. You look like you have something on your mind. Gong Che thought for a while, then stopped. He pulled her and said softly, Moa, will you marry me? Gong Yimo's cheeks reddened. She paused before asking, what happened? Gong Che's eyes flashed with a trace of complexity. Nothing. It's just. I want to be with you as soon as possible. That way, she wouldn't have to worry anymore. Recently, for some reason, he kept having nightmares. There were several times when he woke up with a start. He thought that he had returned to the future, to the world where Moa didn't belong to him. Every time that happened, he couldn't wait to hug Gong Yimo tightly in his arms. Only then could he calm the suffocating feeling. But Gong Yimo misunderstood his meaning. She glared at him and said angrily, You haven't recovered yet, but you're still thinking of improper things. Gong Che knew that she misunderstood. He smiled bitterly in his heart, but on the surface, he pulled her into his arms and lowered his head to look at her. How is it improper? Tao produces yin and yang are in harmony. This kind of thing is in accordance with the will of heaven. He said it ambiguously, and his hot breath blew into Gong Yimo's ear. Gong Yimo's face was completely red, and she glared at him fiercely. Cut it out, let me tell you. Before you recover, don't even think about this kind of thing. Gong Che sighed and pressed her head gently against his chest. Then let's get married first, okay? He hugged the girl's waist. His tone was especially affectionate, but his eyes were filled with sorrow that Gong Yimo couldn't see. Gong Yimo felt that something was wrong with his voice. She couldn't help but ask, what's wrong? Because I'm afraid that you'll be snatched away. Gong Che's heart trembled, but he didn't answer. He only lowered his head to lift her face and kissed her lips. Recently, Gong Che had been asking for kisses more and more frequently, as if he was worried about something. His heart was uneasy, and only her kiss could bring him a trace of comfort. Gong Yimo could also feel his uneasiness, but it had been more than a year, and she had already trusted his feelings. She also liked him, so naturally, she wouldn't reject his intimacy. If her existence could make him feel more at ease, then she was willing to put aside her shyness for the time being. The sunlight shone through the shadows of the trees and landed on the couple who were hugging each other. Everything around them seemed to have disappeared, and they could only feel each other's heat. Gong Che's movements became more urgent. His long body covered Gong Yimo completely, and he pressed her against the tree. He pried open her teeth and penetrated deeply. That domineering way of asking for kisses seemed to be declaring his sovereignty to everything around them. When the kiss reached the critical point, Gong Yimo suddenly thought of something and quickly pushed him away. "Open your eyes." Gong Che's eyes were tightly shut, and he refused to open them. Gong Yimo was anxious. His body temperature was so high, and his heart was beating so fast. Did he think that she didn't know? "Hurry and open your eyes. Otherwise, you're not allowed to get close to me in the future." Only then did Gong Che open his eyes. Indeed, his eyes had turned dark red. Chapter 851. His red eyes were obviously seductive, but at this moment, he was looking at Gong Yimo with an innocent look. Gong Yimo held back her laughter in her heart, but her expression was very serious. "How many times have I told you? You can't continue after you're aroused. Your body can't handle too much emotion. Your eyes turning red is a warning. Don't even think about playing with fire. I'm doing this for the sake of your body." Gong Che was originally very frustrated. Because of this pair of eyes that could reveal secrets, he could only touch her lightly every time before being pushed away. It was really sweet torture, but Gong Che licked his lips and swallowed all the sweetness that belonged to Mo-er. Then, he narrowed his eyes and said seriously, "Mo-er, you said that as long as I'm well, we'll get married immediately. You can't lie to me." Gong Yimo chuckled. "Why would I dare to lie to you? Be good and cooperate with Uncle Lee's treatment. When you're well, we'll get married." Gong Che's eyes lit up when he heard this. He couldn't help but exclaim softly and lifted Gong Yimo up. "Mo-er, Mo-er, you're really too good." Gong Yimo was shocked and exclaimed, "You bastard, let me down." Gong Che laughed. "I'm not letting you down. Unless you say that you want to marry me one more time." Gong Yimo was a little helpless. She could only say it one more time. Gong Che lifted her up and spun her around twice before finally hugging her tightly in his arms. "Do you know?" Gong Che's heart rate rose and fell. He had a bright smile on his face. His handsome face seemed to be glowing under the sunlight. "I've never been so happy. Never. Mo-er, all of this is because of you." Joy was contagious. Gong Yimo rested her head on his shoulder and smiled sweetly. "Then you have to treat me well in the future." Gong Che chuckled and hugged her even tighter. "I will treat you well, because everything I have is yours. Including my life." Gong Yimo was already satisfied. However, the good times did not last long. The two of them spent their days in a sweet paradise. As the situation in the capital became more and more tense, they became tense. Gong Che had received the emperor's handwritten letter. Although the letter only asked about his physical condition, Gong Che still felt that something was off. Coincidentally, at this moment, his subordinates brought news that the reason why they couldn't find the water cloud grass was because someone was one step ahead of them and drugged all the places where the water cloud grass would grow. It wasn't hard to imagine who was behind such a ruthless method. Gong Che's expression was ugly. All this time, he had subconsciously avoided that person because he was afraid that it would implicate Moa. However, the other party had pressured him several times. If he did not act now, he was afraid that he would directly come knocking on his door. "Don't tell anyone about this." Gong Che frowned. "Especially not Moa." "What do you mean you don't want me to know?" Gong Yimo suddenly jumped in from the window and looked at Gong Che with displeasure. "Gong Che, you dare to hide something from me? What do you want the water cloud grass for?" Gong Che felt that something was wrong. He signaled with his eyes for the hidden guard to leave before pulling Gong Yimo into his arms and speaking nervously. "Why would I dare to hide anything from you? My little ancestor, these are troubled times. I just don't want the imperial court's matters to affect the Jianghu." Because he had never lied to Gong Yimo, His words were dry and he did not dare to look at her. Gong Yimo looked at him closely until he felt guilty. Then she suddenly pursed her lips and spoke with grievance. Gong Che, you actually lied to me. There is clearly something going on. I heard everything. You have been looking for the water cloud grass. Why didn't you tell me? Could it be that you don't believe me? Gong Yimo's pair of big eyes looked at him accusingly. Gong Che was shocked and hurriedly coaxed her. Moa, don't be angry. I'll tell you, don't be angry. Gong Yimo sat on the desk. Then tell me clearly. If I find out that you're lying to me again, I'll ignore you. Gong Che's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He did not expect that the thing he was most afraid of would still happen. His handsome face was tinged with sorrow and his lips turned pale. Gong Yimo saw him like this and could not bear to see him like this. Actually, it's a good thing. My illness can be cured. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up and she could not help but ask, could it be this water cloud grass? Gong Che nodded and a cold expression flashed across his face. But this matter, can you not interfere? Someone is controlling the water cloud grass and is waiting for me to cooperate with him. That person is very dangerous and this is also a matter of the imperial court. Can you not interfere? But Gong Yimo frowned. From her point of view, she and Gong Che had feelings for each other. How could she not interfere in his matters? Especially when the other party seemed to be very difficult to deal with. Gong Che suddenly stood up and hugged Gong Yimo's head to his chest as he said anxiously, "No buts." His voice trembled slightly. "Moa, I beg you. Don't interfere in this matter. I can handle everything, all right? I beg you." The uneasiness in his heart finally exploded. Every time he thought of Moa liking someone else and being snatched away by someone else, he felt as if he was going to go crazy. He could not accept this possibility and any signs of it had to be nipped in the bud. Gong Yimo did not know what was going on but she felt Gong Che's body trembling slightly. She thought to herself, could it be that the other party was a very powerful person? Otherwise, why would Gong Che be so afraid? Seeing that Gong Yimo did not reply, Gong Che became anxious. He let go of her and held her face with both hands. He looked straight into her eyes and said firmly, "Moa, promise me that before the Daiyu State's War of the Princes is settled, you will not leave Mount Yunding. I can lose everything, but I can't lose you. Promise me." The uneasiness in his eyes seemed to be real. Gong Yimo's heart tightened and she hurriedly said, "Don't worry, I promise you." Gong Che finally let out a sigh of relief. He caressed Gong Yimo's face again and again, as if this was the only way to ensure that this cute little person was his. Seeing her obediently allowing him to caress her, Gong Che could not hide the love in his eyes. It was as if he wanted to drown her. After a while, he finally calmed down and said slowly, "Moa, if we can survive this disaster, let's leave this place and wander the world from now on. How about that? We'll go wherever Moa wants to go and never come back." His eyes were too sincere and it dispelled the uneasiness in Gong Yimo's heart. No matter what, Gong Che's feelings for her had not changed. The two of them talked for a while. After Gong Yimo left, Gong Che sighed. The smile on his face gradually disappeared and his expression became cold. After some consideration, he summoned a secret guard. "Make the preparations. I will be going down the mountain in a few days. This trip will be done secretly and do not alarm Imperial Father." The secret guard respectfully asked, "May I ask where your highness is going?" Gong Che took a deep breath and looked at the endless night outside the window. "To the Qi Manor." Chapter 852. The night was as cold as water. A carriage sped along the official road. At this rate, they would return to the capital in less than 2 days. A few days ago, Gong Che had just thought of going to see Gong Dai when he received an urgent letter from the emperor. As a prince, he had to return to the capital no matter what. Before leaving, he repeatedly warned Gong Yimo not to leave the mountain no matter what and that he would return quickly. Seeing Gong Yimo agree, he was slightly relieved. Before leaving, he held her hand but was unwilling to let go. No one understood how much he treasured this rebirth. No one knew what kind of gift it was for the heavens to suddenly send his beloved into his hands. In this life, he only wanted to hold her hand tightly and never let go. But this short parting was also for their future together. If he still did not appear, Gong Dai might come to Mount Yunding. At that time, he would truly regret his past actions. So even though he was extremely reluctant, Gong Che still left the mountain. He only wanted a strand of Moa's hair hidden in a perfume pouch to relieve his longing. Unfortunately, was Gong Yimo a docile person? She had long predicted that Gong Che's journey would be dangerous. How could she leave him alone? So not long after Gong Che left, Gong Yimo knocked out the hidden guard guarding her and had Qiu Xingfeng lock him up. Then, she left the mountain alone. Soon, Gong Che arrived at the capital. The capital was as bustling as before, but there were not many passers-by on the streets. Clearly, the urgency of the palace had spread to the common people. Gong Che did not stop. He did not even go to see the emperor first. Instead, he went to Qi Manor. When Gong Dai heard that someone wanted to see him, he guessed who it was. With a strange smile, he let the person in. This was the first time Gong Che had seen Gong Dai since his rebirth. From afar, Gong Che could see that Gong Dai's back was facing him. He was still dressed in black and exuded an imposing aura without being angry. But at that moment, Gong Che actually felt his aloofness. He would never forget that in his previous life, Gong Dai had Moa, and he had been so full of metal. His personality was cold and aloof, but with Moa around, he was never aloof. Gong Che still remembered the rainstorm that day. He was wearing a wedding dress and whipping Gong Dai in the rain. Obviously, he should be happy. It was rare for Gong Dai to serve his sentence in such a docile manner. As for this younger brother of his who always went against him, shouldn't he be happy to give him a beating? But no one knew how much pain he was in. He smiled and brandished his whip, but his tears blended into the rain. Because he had lost miserably, almost completely. That day was the day of his wedding with Su Miaolan. It was also the day Moa rejected him again and resolutely went to Yuchi. He thought that he was jealous of Gong Dai. He was jealous that he could obtain Moa's heart. That whipping was just a way for him to vent his frustration as a loser. Gong Ju's injuries were physical, but his heart was hurt. He thought of his crazy revenge on Gong Dai. It seemed that as long as Gong Dai was not around, Moa would be his. In the end, Gong Dai burned all of his ships in one breath, and finally escaped from under his nose. At that moment, he was about to go crazy. He had never hated someone so much. But if it wasn't for Moa, Gong Che felt that he would admire someone like Gong Dai. Especially in this life, without Moa, Gong Dai's true nature had been completely stimulated. Hearing the movement, Gong Dai slowly turned around. That face was still the same, but the handsome features gave people a kind of knife-like sharpness. Especially when he looked at people, there was a hint of blood. His red lips were bloodthirsty, and his black clothes were restrained. Gong Che could almost foresee that he was going to walk a path full of blood. "Royal brother, how have you been?" His voice was so rough and ear-piercing that Gong Che suddenly came back to his senses. A trace of complexity flashed in his eyes. He said softly, "I've already chosen to withdraw from the War of the Princes. Why are you still dragging me into it?" Gong Dai slightly raised his eyebrows. Those raised sword-like eyebrows looked at Gong Che with some surprise. The person in front of him was obviously different. In the past, Gong Che was arrogant and self-abased. He was gentle and melancholic. To put it bluntly, because of his awkward position, his entire person was tense. His words and actions were methodical, restrained and pale. But now he was obviously different. His white clothes suited him so well, making him look as gentle as jade. That kind of brilliance that came from inside out was not dazzling, but it was hard to ignore. Who was it? Who changed him? Gong Dai stopped thinking and said with a faint smile, "There are many things that you can't get out of unscathed just by withdrawing." A trace of ambition flashed in his eyes. "With you, I can easily achieve my goal. Tell me, shouldn't I look for you?" Gong Che pursed his lips. He knew very well that for Gong Dai in front of him, if there was a shortcut, he would not let it go. Now that I'm no longer the crown prince, what else do you want? But you're the son of the first wife. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes. After the first wife died, father did not appoint another empress. You're the only son of the first wife. Your bloodline can easily rise and pave the way for me. Gong Che roughly thought about Gong Dai's situation in this world. He knew that in this life, Gong Dai was rather passive. Gong Dai's maternal grandfather was far away in the West continent. He was so sharp that his other brothers targeted him and saw him as their biggest opponent. Chapter 853. Gong Dai was somewhat surprised. Do you know what I want you to do? How could he agree so easily without even thinking about it? Gong Che shook his head. There's no need. The best method is for me to take the position of crown prince once more and eradicate my dissidents so that I can be your shield. Gong Dai hadn't expected him to be so clear about what he wanted. That's right, he had been planning this from the very start. Ever since he discovered that the water cloud grass was of great use to Gong Che, he had no choice but to connect the two and speculate that Gong Che's illness could be cured with the water cloud grass. The strange thing was that Gong Che knew that his illness could be cured, yet he still withdrew from the War of the Princes. From this perspective, there could only be two reasons. First, he was retreating in order to advance. He wanted to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight before reaping the benefits. Second, he was afraid. After all, apart from his direct bloodline, Gong Che had nothing else. Thus, he had used his illness to withdraw from the War of the Princes to save his life. After observing for a year, he realized that Gong Che had decided to cooperate with him because of the latter. Gong Che's final request was also very interesting. It seemed that he really did not care about fame or fortune. Seeing Gong Dai remain silent, Gong Che felt uneasy. He was afraid that Gong Dai would not agree, even though he believed that Gong Dai had no reason to refuse. Gong Che took a deep breath and calmly said, "You still have the Li clan to support you. As for me, even if I become emperor, I will have no internal support and no external help. I will find it difficult to advance. But if I help you, the outcome will be different." Gong Dai looked at him with great interest, indicating that he should continue. Under the night sky, Gong Che leaned against a tree as he continued to speak coldly. "The reason I'm helping you is because I value your potential. Once you succeed, it will be a meritorious service. If you're worried that I'll fight with you, there's no need for that. I know very well that I'm not suited to be an emperor." He paused for a moment. "Moreover, I originally didn't want to interfere in this matter. I'm about to get married, and my wife and I both yearn for the life of the martial world. But since you've come to me, I have no other choice. So, I only have this one request. If you agree, you must help me with all your strength and be honest with me." Gong Dai said hoarsely, "By then, can you really give up the power and position that you are about to get and give it away?" Gong Che was calm and collected. "If I was greedy for power, I wouldn't have exposed my hidden illness." Gong Dai suddenly smiled. "Good. I promise you." Seeing that Gong Che was straightforward, his expression was rather pleased. "After this is done, I'll set you free." Gong Che could not help but repeat himself. "It's to let me and my wife leave. It won't interfere in the affairs of the martial world. It's a deal. It's a deal." After Gong Che and Gong Dai finished speaking, they didn't linger for a moment and left under the cover of the night. Gong Dai watched as Gong Che boarded the carriage. That steady bearing was really different from before. Gong Dai's expression was rather subtle. Did Gong Che change because of that wife? Gong Che's words repeatedly and inadvertently mentioned her. If it was really because of a woman, then he really was somewhat curious. After Gong Che boarded the carriage, he headed straight for the imperial palace. At this time, he was holding a jade box in his hand. Inside the jade box was the sincerity that Gong Dai gave him. If nothing unexpected happened, it must be the water cloud grass. Through the gap in the curtains, Gong Che saw Gong Dai's back as he turned and left. Every step he took was fast and steady, as if he was determined to get everything. He didn't know what he had lost. Gong Che closed his eyes and clenched the box in his hand. He suddenly had the thought of robbing Gong Dai's treasure. He smiled bitterly, but his expression gradually turned cold. Moa was his. He didn't rob anyone. Moa was his. Gong Dai, in this life, the country belongs to you. Moa belongs to me. Helping you once is my compensation to you. With this mentality, he arrived at the imperial palace. When he saw the emperor, he directly explained his physical condition. After learning that Gong Che had found a way to treat him, Gong Cheng was overjoyed and hurriedly ordered the imperial physician to study the formula of the water cloud grass. The happy event made Gong Cheng's somewhat morbid complexion look a lot better. Gong Che didn't forget that the emperor was still ill and stayed behind to express his condolences. Because he deliberately showed off, Gong Cheng quickly discovered that Gong Che was different. But after not seeing him for a year, his son seemed to have grown a lot. His speech was extraordinary, and his words were meaningful. It was a world of difference from a year ago. This made Gong Cheng very surprised. Because in Gong Cheng's heart, he never had the idea of changing the crown prince. But the previous crown prince was really difficult to convince the public. It wasn't that he wasn't outstanding, but he had more than enough knowledge, insufficient means, and even less ability because he lacked confidence. But this time, he came back a lot more confident. In addition, Gong Che didn't hide his private property. Gong Cheng saw his son quickly become stronger and discovered that his ability was extraordinary. Unconsciously, some thoughts in his heart became active, but Gong Cheng didn't say it on the spot. The father and son chatted for a while, then Gong Che went back. Although everyone knew that he was no longer the crown prince, Gong Cheng's decree at that time said that the crown prince was ill and recuperating. Moreover, it was a congenital disease. It can be said that the crown prince's position existed in name only. When there was a new crown prince, Gong Che would be replaced. But now, Gong Che was still in name, so he still lived in the East Palace. When he returned to the East Palace, it was already late at night. Gong Che washed up and went to bed. He heard the bell in the middle of the night. They had only been separated for a few days, but he felt that they had been separated for a long time. The night was as cold as water. The palace servants had all retreated. The entire palace was even quieter, so quiet that it could magnify any emotion. His body was slightly sore. Gong Che felt as if something sour was constantly drilling into his body. He could only slightly ease it by curling up his body. Moa! He really wanted Moa. He didn't know how long he would stay here. Gong Che thought that as long as he had time, he would go to Yunding Mountain to see her. But he really missed her, really missed her. Gong Che thought of his previous life. It was also a lonely night like this. He endured it alone and could only rely on his imagination to get through those cold nights. At that time, Moa wouldn't give him any response. He could only lie to himself again and again. Now, Moa would give him a response, but he didn't dare to bring her out. He was afraid that his Moa would eventually be snatched away by someone else. He really couldn't bear the pain of having her and then losing her again, but he really, really wanted to bring her out in front of others and announce to the world that she belonged to him. With the strand of hair in his arms, Gong Che couldn't help but hug the blanket and force himself to sleep. It was a quiet night, but a cold hand strangely appeared. She slowly reached into the blanket and then suddenly grabbed Gong Che's ankle. At that moment, Gong Che's body tensed up. In the next second, the dagger in his hand was pressed against the person's neck. His eyes were cold, without a trace of his usual gentleness. Chapter 854. Moa. In the next second, the vigilance in Gong Che's eyes turned into surprise. Gong Yimo clicked her tongue as she reached out to remove the dagger from her neck and giggled. Not bad, your reaction is very quick. This past year, I didn't teach you for nothing. Gong Che was both surprised and happy. He was surprised because how long had Moa been with him? Had she seen Gong Dai? He was happy because he really missed her too much. He hadn't seen her for a full 10 days. Moa. Gong Che's body moved faster than his mind as he dragged her from the end of the bed into his embrace. He hugged her tightly, as if he was afraid that she would run away. Gong Yimo saw that she was covered in dust and pushed him. I'm very dirty. If you hug me like this, you'll have wasted your bath tonight. But how could Gong Che listen to anything else at this time? The person he had been thinking about day and night had appeared on his bed in the next second. Was there anything happier than this? After hugging for a long time, Gong Che slowly regained his senses and said in a depressed tone, "You naughty girl, didn't I tell you not to go down the mountain? You clearly promised me." Gong Yimo pursed her lips. Although Gong Che was scolding her, she wasn't angry at all. She wasn't afraid at all. If you want me not to go down the mountain, then I won't go down the mountain. I want to. Gong Che was anxious. He moved back a little and looked at Gong Yimo's eyes with disapproval. There was a fear in his eyes that he didn't realize. Then what did you see? Have you been following me? Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows slightly. You seem to be afraid that I saw something. I'm so curious. What are you afraid of? Moa. Gong Che frowned and looked like he wanted to punish her, but there was nothing he could do. He was so scared that he was going crazy, but Moa was not serious at all. She did not take it seriously at all. She didn't know. He couldn't bear the possibility of losing her, not even a little bit. Seeing that Gong Che was really panicking and his entire body was tense, Gong Yimo rolled her eyes and mercifully stopped tormenting him. Instead, she threw herself into his arms. Because I miss you. Gong Che's body tensed up even more. Gong Yimo smiled and acted coquettishly in his arms. I'm guessing that you'll be out for a long time this time. Although Uncle Emperor has given you many secret guards, you still lack a powerful fighter by your side, such as me. I can help you. Gong Che's hands trembled as he stroked her back. His eyes were filled with unconcealable tenderness. His Moa, she was wholeheartedly doing it for him, but he only wanted to hide her. I don't need you to help me. I just want you to be well and not get involved in these matters. Moa, you're too disobedient. Gong Yimo pursed her lips. Because she was curled up in Gong Che's arms, she did not notice how complicated Gong Che's expression was at this moment. But when he saw her delicate appearance, he couldn't help but smile and lower his head to seal her lips. Little thing, you still want to part ways? Gong Yimo protested. She pouted because she was angry, not because she was asking for a kiss. Why should he kiss her? But Gong Che ignored her protest. He quickly immersed himself in her sweetness. His actions were domineering and gentle, completely encircling Gong Yimo in his territory, not giving in at all. From her lips, to her teeth, to that cute little tongue, everything was wantonly claimed by Gong Che. Soon, his eyes turned dark red. It was too dark. Gong Yimo didn't see it, but she felt it. The emotions that were originally immersed in it disappeared, and she immediately pushed him away. You lecher. Aren't you angry? Then why did you kiss me? Gong Che laughed softly. His chest vibrated, venting his joy. I'm a lecher. But Moa climbing into her fiancé's bed in the middle of the night. What's that? He bit her nose forcefully and asked with a mischievous smile. Is Moa a flower thief? Phut, you're not a flower thief. Gong Yimo turned her head to the side. After this commotion, their anger had mostly dissipated. Gong Che knew that she was worried about him. Even if he was afraid just now, his tone shouldn't have been so harsh. So after his anger subsided, he said somewhat shamefully, Moa, I'm sorry. It was my fault just now. Don't be angry, okay? Gong Yimo thought that Gong Che had asked her to stay on Mount Yunding. Back then, she had agreed, but now she ran out. She was in the wrong. So after a moment of silence, she muttered, I didn't mean to disobey you. No, I'm older than you. I shouldn't be so childish. All right, I know you're just being impatient for a moment. In the darkness, the two apologized to each other. As they spoke, they suddenly looked at each other and smiled. Chapter 856. Gong Yimo had always been waiting for an opportunity to help Gong Che. But Gong Che kept a close eye on her, as if he was afraid that she would interfere in this matter. Now that the emperor's health was getting worse, the princes were constantly moving. With Gong Dai's support, Gong Che, as the crown prince, became the biggest obstacle in everyone's eyes. Gong Dai avoided everyone's gaze and secretly operated himself. In order to protect himself, Gong Che asked the emperor for the position of commander of the imperial guards for his subordinates. But even so, Gong Che was still threatened everywhere. Poisoning his meals was a small matter. Today, he was riding a horse to patrol for the emperor, but the horse was suddenly frightened. If Gong Che had not learned some martial arts and jumped the horse in time, the consequences would have been unthinkable. But he was still injured, injuring his left leg and lower abdomen. Gong Yimo saw that Gong Che's leg was injured, his face was pale, and he was lying on the bed reading documents. She could not help but feel angry. Gong Che did not notice anything. Seeing Gong Yimo's frown, he thought that she was worried about his injury. He could not help but pull her hand to sit on the bed and gently smile. "Don't worry, Moa. It's only a small injury. I'll be fine in 2 days." Gong Yimo saw his indifferent expression, as if nothing had happened, so she could not help but glare at him. "Yes, you're fine this time, but what about next time? Do you think you're a 9 lives cat demon? You won't die." Gong Che saw that she was angry, so he quickly put down the documents in his hand and hugged her in his embrace. That smile made it seem as if hugging her meant that he already had the whole world. "All right, wife, don't be angry. I'll take good care of myself. Don't be angry, okay?" His mischievous smile made Gong Yimo very unhappy. He clearly did not realize his mistake. Gong Yimo could not take it anymore and pushed him hard. "Stop it. Are you stupid? You're already like this and you can still smile." Gong Che thickened his face and once again hugged Gong Yimo tightly in his embrace and took a deep breath. "Moa, you will never know how happy I am right now." His sigh made Gong Yimo stunned. Happy? She did not understand why Gong Che did not want anything in the end when he helped the other party. Why did he look as if he gained something? Little did she know that in Gong Che's heart, he really felt that he gained. Because he always believed that he was the one who stole Gong Ju's happiness. With this strange guilt, how could he care about the gains and losses? But Mo, she was his. Was his. But Gong Yimo did not know that. She felt unreconciled. She thought that Gong Che was controlled by the other party because of the water cloud grass. Did that mean that if she obtained the water cloud grass, Gong Che would be able to withdraw from this war? In any case, he did not want the throne. There was no need to fight for a stranger. With her own thoughts, Gong Yimo mumbled a few words and did not continue. Seeing that he had pacified her, Gong Che hugged her and continued to read his documents. He looked as if he had a wife and everything was fine. Little did he know that Gong Yimo already had her own thoughts. That night, Gong Che fell asleep. Gong Yimo carefully removed Gong Che's hand and secretly got up. She glanced at Gong Che and secretly made up her mind. She was going to steal the water cloud grass. She was now at the 4th level of wind and nature. There should not be many opponents in the world. Stealing a few blades of grass was not a problem for her. She did as she said. She sneaked out the door and knocked out the patrolling secret guards. Then, she rushed towards the direction of Chi Manor. As for Gong Che, he had a dream. It could not be called a dream. He was just reliving his previous life. On the day of Mo and Gong Dai's wedding, Gong Che did not know what kind of mood he was in as he sat there. He only knew that because of his reckless actions, Chang Shi was dead. His imperial father was also dead. Moa rejected him once again. She was pregnant with Gong Dai's child and married Gong Dai. He was the officiator of the wedding. Why did he feel so terrible? Looking at the woman he loved, looking forward to marrying another man, he did not even have the strength to struggle. Because he had made a big mistake. Because he had recognized reality. He understood that no matter what he did, Moa would not look at him. He could only endure and give up. Then, he smiled and gave his blessings. His heart was bleeding. Every minute and every second seemed to drain him of all his strength. Not a single bit was left. No. It was not like this. In the dream, Gong Che's brows were tightly knitted together. Mo-er was his. Mo-er was his. He had liked Mo-er for so many years. His love for Mo-er was definitely not any less than Gong Dai's. Yes. Mo-er was his. He had been reborn. He had returned to his previous life. He had returned to the time before all the dispute. In this life, Mo-er was finally his. Gong Che finally revealed a pale smile. He reached out to hug Gong Yimo. However, he hugged nothing. A huge sense of danger made him open his eyes. He felt that the bed beside him was already cold. Mo-er had disappeared. Mo-er! He hurriedly got up. For a moment, he could not distinguish between the dream and reality. Could it be that he had not been reborn? Could it be that Mo-er had married someone else? Could it be that he was still alone? At this time, the shadow guard also woke up. He got up and kneeled to Gong Che to beg for forgiveness. Your Highness, this subordinate is incompetent. Madam, she seems to have gone to Qi Manor. Qi Manor, Gong Dai. At that moment, a huge panic enveloped Gong Che. He practically crawled up from the bed on all fours. In the process, he almost fell down on the bed because of his leg injury. Why did Mo-er go to Qi Manor? Could it be that he was not enough? Did she fall in love with Gong Dai? No. No, no, Gong Che forced himself to calm down. He thought of Gong Yimo's abnormal behavior today. She must have gone to steal the water cloud grass for him, because she thought that as long as she stole the water cloud grass, she would no longer be under Gong Dai's control. This silly girl. Men. In the midst of the panic, Gong Che's voice trembled. Take people to Qi Manor. Search carefully along the way. You must bring Madam back. Go quickly. Yes. The subordinate hurriedly carried out the order. Because Gong Yimo's Qinggong was outstanding, other than a few shadow guards, no one else was affected. They led several hundred people to Qi Manor. After Gong Che hurriedly put on his clothes, he also led a group of people out of the palace. He hoped that all of this was not too late. He could not let the two of them meet. In the middle of the night, the Crown Prince's men suddenly surrounded Qi Manor. Not only was Gong Dai very surprised, even the people watching from the shadows thought that there was an internal conflict and were waiting to see a good show. Gong Che hurriedly rushed over. Gong Dai, wearing a black coat, slowly walked to the door. It was obvious that he had just woken up. His sharp eyes swept over the people in front of the door. The two sides were facing each other and there was a dangerous aura in the air. The newcomers were aggressive, as if there was something important that they had to force their way in. Imperial brother, what is the meaning of this? Gong Dai smiled coldly. Could it be that after being the crown prince for a few days, Gong Che wanted to burn the bridge after crossing the river? Chapter 857. Gong Che's expression was cold. With a wave of his hand, everyone retreated. Only he stepped forward and spoke solemnly. It was my fault for visiting so suddenly. Someone tried to assassinate me and I brought men to pursue him. Someone saw him enter Qi Manor. Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. He scrutinized Gong Che for a moment before beckoning with his finger. Someone stepped forward to await his orders. De Qing, where is the little rat that snuck into the manor? Gong Dai's ear-piercing voice sounded even stranger in the night. De Qing was the steward of Qi Manor and he respectfully replied. Reporting to Your Highness the Crown Prince, an assassin broke into the manor just now. His martial arts were not bad and his Qinggong was nimble. Seeing that he had stolen something and was about to leave, this servant had no choice but to issue a kill order. He has already been shot to death by a flurry of arrows. His body is in the rear courtyard and will be buried tomorrow morning. At that moment, almost everyone heard the sound of something breaking. Gong Che stared in disbelief at the steward who had just spoken. Under the flickering light of the torches, his face was completely drained of color. Dead. Gong Che's voice was almost inaudible. This was simply a joke. How could Mo-er die? How could she die? Gong Che wanted to laugh but he could not. In this life, Mo-er's martial arts were far from the unrivaled level of her previous life. Furthermore, Gong Dai had recruited many strange people. Moa might not be a match for them, but was that possible? If Moa really died, if she died for him, a metallic taste flowed out from his throat. Gong Che suddenly forced his way into Qi Manor. His leg was injured and he could not exert any strength. However, his eyes were terrifyingly red. Under his oppressive aura, no one dared to block him. Gong Dai also discovered that Gong Che's situation was somewhat strange. He gave Deqing a look and Deqing automatically led Gong Che to the rear courtyard. It seemed that the person who had died was not an assassin but a very important person to the Crown Prince. His death would not cause the Crown Prince and the Prince to turn against each other, right? Deqing thought with lingering fear. Gong Dai also felt that it was very strange. All along, he had been very suspicious of Gong Che's motives. He didn't want anything, only the water cloud grass and freedom. For these, he was willing to be his shield and promised to give up everything after the matter was done. To be honest, only a saint would be willing to give so much without asking for anything in return. However, Gong Dai was not afraid. No matter what Gong Che planned to do in the end, he believed that he would definitely be the final winner. But now, Gong Che actually revealed such an expression because of an assassin. It was as if the sky had collapsed. This was really strange. Wasn't Gong Che always gentle and amiable? In the past, it was to preserve the Crown Prince's bearing. Now, even if Mount Tai collapsed, his expression would not change. Who was that person that could make him lose his composure like this? Gong Che had never walked such a long road before. From the front door to the backyard, he limped along, his eyes staring straight ahead. However, the road seemed to have no end. It was pitch black and extended to the deepest abyss. In his bewitched state, he had already thought it through. If Moa really died, he would kill his enemy and then die with her. He didn't cross time and space to obtain his beloved and then lose her. That kind of person's life had no meaning. However, he also hoped that the one who died wasn't her. She wasn't so weak. She would never disappoint people. Soon, he arrived at the backyard. In the middle of the yard, there was a petite corpse wrapped in a straw mat. His pupils shrank and he actually didn't dare to go forward. Deqing glanced at Gong Che's frightening expression and was slightly shocked. He deliberated over his words and said softly, "Your Highness, this is the assassin who forced his way in. Because he was shot to death by arrows, his death was terrifying. Your Highness, it's best if you don't go forward." However, before he could finish, Gong Che slowly walked to the corpse. He squatted down and reached out with a trembling hand, wanting to lift the mat. At this time, Gong Dai had unknowingly followed up and asked coldly, "Imperial brother, if this person is really the one you're looking for, what will you do?" His expression was rather solemn because Gong Che's current appearance was too abnormal. That man who was emitting a sad and ruthless aura was completely different from his usual gentleness. It was as if he was a completely different person. When the half-kneeling Gong Che heard this, his back straightened and his fingers paused. It was unknown if it was because he was extremely tense, but he actually smiled. Without turning his head, he only said 4 words, "I won't rest until death." If Moa died, so what if the opponent was Gong Dai? Those who hurt her deserved to die. Only death could appease his pain. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air because they had never thought that one day, they would hear the words "I won't rest until death" from the modest Crown Prince's mouth. The fog in the night was heavy and the cold condensed, making it difficult to breathe. Everyone was silent. Just as Gong Che was about to uncover the straw mat again, Gong Dai suddenly sneered. "Forget it, you don't need to uncover it. This prince can guarantee that the person who died is not the one you're looking for." Gong Dai's words were like a ray of light, making Gong Che feel like he had come back from the jaws of death. He quickly turned his head and stared at him. "What makes you say that?" Gong Dai revealed a faint smile. "The only person who can make you like this, I think it's that wife who made you want to run away with her, right? The one who died is a man." Gong Che was shocked and his hand quickly lifted the mat. The corpse was horrifying, but it was really a man. Gong Che was so overjoyed that he forgot everything. He did not realize that Gong Dai had already noticed Gong Yimo. He was filled with joy, as if he had been reborn again. Mo-er was still alive. She was still alive. Gong Che stood up and prepared to go somewhere else to find Mo-er. The moment he passed, Gong Dai suddenly reached out and grabbed his arm tightly. Under the weak light of the torch, the two equally handsome people stood together. Their gazes almost made sparks fly. Is she the reason? Is she the reason why you selflessly helped this prince? Gong Dai lowered his voice and asked. His expression seemed to be very interested in Gong Yimo. Gong Che reached out and pried Gong Dai's fingers apart. I can touch anything, but she is my bottom line. Since he had already been discovered, Gong Che did not need to hide anymore. He seriously looked at Gong Dai with a complicated look that others could not understand. This prince knows that you never understood why this prince helped you. Now you know? It's because she wants freedom. She likes the Jianghu. Then I need a healthy body to go with her. You want the country, so I'll help you. Because compared to her, the country is worthless. Those powerful words made Gong Dai's heart tremble. Men were born in this world, so it should be their innate ability to make a name for themselves. But Gong Che, for a woman, he did not even care about the country. Interesting, he was becoming more and more curious about that woman. Chapter 858. Not long after Gong Che left the Qi Manor, Gong Dai heard his subordinate Lo Chi's report. Your Highness, someone has broken into the secret chamber. This subordinate is incompetent and allowed him to escape. Speaking of which, he could not be blamed. There were only so many guards in the Qi Manor. At the beginning, the man who had broken in had been shot to death by arrows. Later on, the Crown Prince had brought people over. The two sides were in a standoff. No one had expected that a third party would dare to fish in troubled waters. Oh! Gong Dai glanced at Lo Chi and smiled. What did the intruder steal? Lo Chi said in shame, the water cloud grass has been stolen. Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. However, he was not anxious. Back then, he had paid a great price to destroy all the places where the water cloud grass grew. How could he possibly leave all the remaining water cloud grass in one place? Gong Che's body seemed to be fine now. However, only the symptoms were treated and not the root of the problem. If he wanted to completely cure him, he would need at least 10 stalks, which was equivalent to 2 sets of medicine. Now that 5 stalks had been stolen, Gong Dai was very surprised. It seemed that Gong Che's wife's martial arts were not bad. However, it would not be so easy to obtain the remaining 5 stalks from him. After Gong Che left, he searched many places, causing the people of the capital to panic. Until someone quickly reported to him that Gong Yimo had already returned. At that moment, everyone could feel the extreme anger after Gong Che's bliss. He hurriedly rushed back, becoming angrier the more he walked. He had repeatedly ordered her not to interfere. Even if she really wanted to do something, she should not have left without saying goodbye. Did she not know that he would be afraid and worried? Gong Che clutched at his slightly aching chest. Just now, he had really been afraid that she would die. That kind of suffocating pain could not be recalled. Just thinking about it made him feel as if his illness was about to act up. Gong Che thought about a lot of things. He even thought about confining her or sending Gong Yimo back to Mount Yunding. However, when he returned and kicked open the door to the bedroom, he saw the bloodstains on the floor and the basin of blood. At that moment, all his anger stopped. He suddenly felt as if something had dug out a piece of his heart, causing him to twitch in pain. He saw Gong Yimo pull down her sleeves in a panic. The traces of bandaging were so obvious, and there was still the smell of blood in the room. Gong Yimo sat on the edge of the bed and looked at him with some annoyance. Her pale little mouth opened and closed slightly. You! Why did you come back? She had only been back for less than 15 minutes. Gong Che didn't say a word. He just walked closer step by step. There seemed to be black flames spreading from his body. The closer he got, the more afraid Gong Yimo felt. Finally, she lowered her head like a little wife. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be disobedient." At first, she didn't realize how powerful the other party was. After walking around like this, she realized how powerful the other party was. Today, if she hadn't been lucky and someone had sneaked in before her to steal things, she would have been the one to be shot to death by the arrows. Moreover, when she returned, she saw many people looking for someone. It was obvious that Gong Che had woken up and guessed her actions. He had come to find her. Gong Yimo then realized that she was afraid. After all, Gong Che had repeatedly emphasized before, but she had knowingly broken the rules and caused everyone to be anxious. Gong Che didn't answer. He just knelt on one knee beside her and reached out to check her wound. Gong Yimo dodged, secretly complaining in her heart. Gong Che's expression was so scary. If he found out that she was injured, he would be even angrier. However, how could Gong Che allow her to dodge? Usually, he was gentle and gentle. He was even more obedient to her. But now, he was very domineering and locked her up. Then, he slowly pulled up her sleeve. On her snow-white arm, the wound that she had hastily bandaged started to bleed again. Gong Che's pupils shrank. He held his breath and tried to untie the bandage. Gong Yimo held his hand and looked at him pitifully. "Gong Che. I'm fine. Don't look at me, okay?" Wouldn't the more he looked, the angrier he would be? Gong Che glanced at her. His eyes were pitch black like an abyss. That cold gaze made Gong Yimo's heart tremble. Her hand subconsciously loosened. The blood-stained bandage was peeled off layer by layer. A knife wound so deep that the bone could be seen lay in front of Gong Che's eyes. Gong Che's eyes instantly turned red. It was different from the dark red color when he was aroused. Now, his eyes were bloodshot. He pursed his lips as if he was enduring something. Gong Yimo swallowed. The atmosphere was too oppressive. She would rather Gong Che say a few words to her. If he really couldn't, he could just scold her. This kind of silence was too scary. So, she held his hand that was holding her arm and pretended to be happy. "Don't be angry. My injury was worth it because I stole 5 stalks of water cloud grass. Is that enough?" She deliberately used a relaxed tone to say, "If it's enough, you don't have to be that person's shield anymore. I'm really worried about you." Before she could finish speaking, Gong Che suddenly pounced on her. In the next second, he sucked on her lips. That ferocious kiss was more like a bite than a kiss. Gong Yimo cried out in pain. But when she opened her mouth, Gong Che took advantage of her weakness. Their tongues intertwined and she felt as if her breath was being taken away. What was going on? She was almost out of breath. Gong Yimo couldn't move one hand. Her other hand was powerless to push Gong Che away. However, no matter how much she struggled, she couldn't push him away. Gong Che was like a wild beast that had been provoked. When their lips were entangled, there was a rusty taste. It turned out that Gong Yimo had bitten his lips. Gong Che was stunned. Only then did he raise his body to look at her. The tips of their noses touched. Her entire person was like a begonia flower that had been ruthlessly ravaged. Her eyes were filled with tenderness and unyieldingness as she looked at him angrily. It was great that she was still alive. She was lying under him and slowly blossoming. Gong Che lowered his head sincerely and gently sucked on her lips. His own lips were still bleeding, but he didn't feel it at all. He only carefully traced her lips over and over again. In his eyes, there was a pain that Gong Yimo couldn't understand. What's wrong? She finally realized that something was wrong with Gong Che. Even if he was angry, he shouldn't be like this. Gong Che didn't answer her. He only kissed her gently while stroking her hair. He tried his best to absorb the heat from her body as if that was the nourishment that he relied on to survive. "Moa," his voice was hoarse and had a hint of pleading. "Why aren't you obedient? Ian, why aren't you obedient?" He thought that she might meet Gong Dai and leave him. He thought that she might be killed by Gong Dai. From then on, they would be separated by life and death. That kind of fear was like a thin thread that wrapped around every nerve in his body. Every nerve was stretched taut, but he couldn't do anything to her. Gong Yimo didn't know how to answer. At this moment, she also felt a little guilty. She shouldn't have acted on her own and caused such a big commotion. "Did you know?" Someone died in Chi Manor tonight. I thought it was you. Damn it. Why did you scare me like this? Chapter 859. Gong Che's red eyes made Gong Yimo feel even more ashamed. Her eyes flickered as she looked away and said in a muffled voice, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. I'll listen to you in the future, okay? Why do you want to leave me? Unfortunately, Gong Che did not listen to her at all. Some negative and dark emotions took advantage of the situation and made his eyes turn even redder. He hugged Gong Yimo even tighter. Don't even think about leaving me in this lifetime. That terrifying possessiveness made Gong Yimo tremble. She hugged Gong Che back with one hand and said pitifully, I won't leave you. She did not expect that her words would actually make Gong Che glare at her angrily. He looked at her and suddenly said faintly, perhaps you'll only be obedient if I lock you up. His words made Gong Yimo stunned. She really did not like to be imprisoned or tied up. Gong Che narrowed his eyes. Those scarlet eyes were very dangerous as they locked onto her. He did not look like he was joking at all. I should cripple your martial arts and lock you up with me. This way, you won't be able to run away. Gong Yimo saw that he was becoming more and more demonic and could not help but become serious. Gong Che, I don't have the intention to leave you. You do. Gong Che suddenly frowned and said irritably. He arched his body and completely pressed Gong Yimo into his territory. Those demonic red eyes stared at her aggressively. His gaze slowly moved down from her neck. She seemed to have become his most delicious prey. She had nowhere to run even if she wanted to. You want to leave me. You want to find someone else. You don't like me. You never said that you liked me. He pressed harder and harder. The hatred and jealousy in his eyes seemed to have materialized. Why don't you like me? I clearly love you so much. That kind of danger followed him like a shadow. But his voice gradually became filled with sorrow. That tense body seemed to be enduring some kind of great pain. He looked at you just like that. Even though he was right in front of you, you felt like you were in hell. Gong Yimo looked at him with her eyebrows tightly knitted together. She didn't understand why Gong Che would have such an expression. It was as if he had experienced endless despair, as if he had stepped into eternal damnation. In short, he shouldn't be like this. Gong Yimo gritted her teeth, grabbed his hand and placed it on her chest. She slowly said, Didn't I say that I like you? Gong Che looked at her in confusion. Gong Yimo suddenly smiled. Grabbing his hand, she slowly unbuttoned her clothes. Her fair collarbone was gradually revealed, causing Gong Che's Adam's apple to move. His gaze was glued to her fair skin. Forget it. It's pointless to say what you like. You said that I don't like you and want to leave you. How about I give you my body and let you experience it for yourself? Do I like you or not? With a blink of her eyes, she suddenly turned into a soul-sucking seductress. Gong Che was still immersed in endless negative emotions, but Gong Yimo's words were like a hook that pulled him out. He couldn't help but straighten his body and take a step back. Looking at the seductress that was wantonly blooming on the bed, his mind went blank. He didn't understand why things had suddenly turned out like this. Gong Yimo slightly curled her lips and slowly got up. Her neck arched beautifully, and her incomparably seductive lips gently rubbed against Gong Che's thin lips. His body trembled, and he looked down. The moment he regained his senses, he saw the seductress in front of him who seemed to want to suck out his essence. His Adam's apple kept moving. He felt like he was pulled out of a whirlpool and then fell into another one. If I give you my body, will you believe my feelings for you? Gong Yimo looked up into his eyes with a smile that wasn't a smile. If you want it, you can take it, Mo-er. Gong Che couldn't control himself anymore. He bent down and hugged Gong Yimo. He frowned painfully. I'm sorry, Mo-er. I didn't mean to scare you. I was just too scared just now. Gong Yimo said softly. I thought you would be happy. I stole the water cloud grass. I thought you would be touched. Feeling Gong Yimo's body tremble slightly, Gong Che blamed himself even more. I'm sorry, He closed his eyes. I'd rather not have the water cloud grass than bear the risk of you leaving me. Mo, you're too important to me. You'll never understand how much I love you. His feelings seemed to have been twisted. His possessiveness towards Mo had reached a terrifying level. But he couldn't control himself, and he didn't want to control himself. Gong Yimo felt his uneasiness and was a little scared. But no matter what, his feelings for her couldn't be faked. That was enough. Moreover, strictly speaking, she was in the wrong in the first place. After a long silence, Gong Yimo pouted and said with grievance. You scared me just now. She puffed up her cheeks and hit Gong Che. She was like a little punching bag. Her face was proud and timid, and her lips were pouted high. Gong Che also realized that he was being too unreasonable. He hurriedly coaxed her. His expression was unbelievably gentle, as if he wanted to melt her in his arms. Gong Yimo let him coax her for a long time before she proudly raised her chin and took out the water cloud grass from her space. Here, I got it. It's not that difficult. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. She purposely exaggerated her abilities, as if saying, hurry up and praise me. If you praise me, I'll forgive you. Gong Che's expression was complicated. In his previous life, it was also Mo who personally handed him the water cloud grass. Could this be fate? Gong Che didn't say anything. Gong Yimo glanced at him and couldn't help but ask, is this enough to treat your illness? Not enough. But Gong Che didn't intend to tell her. He sighed. Mo, I have my own reasons for helping that person. It's not completely controlled by the water cloud grass. Gong Yimo didn't understand. Why? He's just using you. Gong Che touched her face. Silly girl, don't you want to go out and have fun? If the country isn't stable, how can there be a small family? I just hope that when you go out, you can be more at ease. This is also my responsibility as a prince. Anyway, I will solve this matter properly. Mo, promise me, don't take any more risks. Gong Yimo suddenly had an epiphany. You've asked me not to interfere a few times. Are you afraid that I'll be in danger? Or, are you afraid that I'll meet someone? She obviously didn't want to ask, but this feeling was getting stronger and stronger, and she couldn't ignore it. That person, is Gong Dai? Mo. Gong Che suddenly raised his voice. He looked at Gong Yimo sternly, but since Moa felt it, he didn't have to hide it anymore. Moa, promise me that you'll never see him again, all right? Chapter 860. Gong Yimo was shocked when she heard him raise his voice all of a sudden. Who would have thought that it was really because of one person? Gong Che saw that Gong Yimo wasn't speaking, so he emphasized again. Moa, you can do whatever you want, but don't go and see him, okay? I'm begging you. But why? Gong Yimo asked curiously. She really couldn't understand. Could it be that she had some sort of interaction with that person? There's no why, Gong Che gasped for air. He grabbed Gong Yimo's hand tightly and kept saying, don't see him, but his face was getting paler and paler. Large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. In an instant, he looked like he had just been fished out of the water. Oh no, Gong Che's illness is acting up. Gong Yimo was shocked. She had never seen Gong Che's illness act up before. His illness was cyclical, and it rarely acted up suddenly. Today, it was only because his emotions were fluctuating too much that he became like this. Where's the medicine? Where's your medicine? Gong Che pointed at his chest painfully. Gong Yimo hurriedly found a small bottle in his arms and poured out a pill for him to take. After taking the medicine, Gong Che didn't recover immediately. He was still very uncomfortable. His face was pale and his lips were pale. Gong Yimo hurriedly wiped his sweat, but Gong Che grabbed her hand. Moa! Don't see him. Seeing that he was still thinking about this matter, Gong Yimo hurriedly said, okay, I won't see him. In the future, I'll run when he appears, okay? Don't talk anymore. Gong Che closed his eyes in pain. He knew that he was being selfish, but he couldn't control his desires. Once, he desired her so much that he was willing to share her with Gong Dai. But that was his bottom line when he was pushed to the limit. He even felt that if Moa took one more look at him and was willing to give him a chance, she would definitely discover who was the most suitable person for her. But now, she was already his. He would be crazy to give others a chance. Moa, his voice was barely audible. I'm sorry. His heart was filled with guilt and he didn't even dare to look at her. Gong Yimo sighed and wiped away all the beads of sweat on his forehead. Silly, we are husband and wife. No matter what the reason was, he would never harm her. Gong Che's expression became a little better. That's right, they were husband and wife. After resting for a while, Gong Che's breathing became much smoother. However, he lay on the bed with his black hair spread out and his face pale. He looked like a decadent glazed doll with a fragile beauty. Gong Yimo saw that he was not so uncomfortable, and also breathed a sigh of relief. Looking out of the window, it was already dawn. Gong Che suddenly rubbed his head against her thigh and said softly, "Thank you, Moa." Gong Yimo was a little confused. "Thank me for what?" Gong Che narrowed his eyes and looked at her exposed wound. A trace of pain flashed past his eyes. "I know what you did for me. I like it very much." Gong Yimo was stunned. Gong Che gradually became exhausted. He closed his eyes and frowned, but the corners of his mouth slowly curved up. "You did everything for me. I'm so happy and satisfied." "Thank you, Moa," Gong Yimo then snorted proudly. Her dangerous actions last night were not in vain. His words were enough. "As long as you know that I'm good to you, you have to be good to me in the future, okay?" However, Gong Che did not reply. Gong Yimo looked down and saw that he had fallen asleep quietly with his forehead resting on her thigh. Gong Yimo could not help but laugh. She sat and looked at Gong Che's sleeping face. She also felt sleepy. Fortunately, the bed was very big. She lay back and both of them slept well. After this incident, their relationship became even better. They were so sweet and affectionate that they could torture each other at any time. However, how could the other princes let Gong Che live so well? With Gong Dai's strong support and the emperor's nurturing, Gong Che displayed extraordinary talent and ability. His power was at its peak. If this continued, the throne would belong to the crown prince. Seeing that the emperor's body was getting weaker by the day, everyone was anxious. They thought of more sinister ways to harm him again and again. On this day, Gong Yimo was having her meal in the Eastern Palace. She saw the head eunuch of the Eastern Palace, Defu, rushing over. Not good, madam," because Gong Che had ordered everyone to call her Madam Gong Yimo. "What's wrong?" Gong Yimo looked up and saw the gloomy weather outside the window. She suddenly felt a little depressed. Defu knelt in front of Gong Yimo with an ugly expression. Someone tampered with His Majesty's medicine. That person framed His Highness the Crown Prince. He also said that His Majesty's illness was not good because of the Crown Prince's medicine. Also, poison was found on the Crown Prince. Gong Yimo stood up and said anxiously, "Then where is the Crown Prince now?" Defu said with a sad face, "His Highness is temporarily detained. His Highness was afraid that you would be worried, so he secretly sent a message to tell you not to be afraid. However, His Majesty sent the Imperial Dragon Guards to personally investigate. They will come to the Eastern Palace to search later." After he said this, Gong Yimo instantly understood. This was clearly a trap. There must be something in the Eastern Palace that violated the rules. And Gong Che could still send a message. Clearly, there was no need to worry for the time being. At this moment, there was a commotion outside. It must be the Imperial Dragon Guards. Gong Yimo rolled her eyes and said a few words to the panicking Defu. Defu did not know what she wanted to do, but he still obeyed her orders and blocked the Imperial Dragon Guards at the door. "Move aside. We are following His Majesty's orders to thoroughly investigate the Eastern Palace. Are you going to defy His Majesty's orders?" Defu's legs trembled, but he said firmly, "Young priest, His Majesty meant for the Imperial Dragon Guards to investigate this matter. He did not say for you to search the residence. Is the Eastern Palace a place you can barge into just because you want to?" The Imperial Dragon Guards were a little hesitant. However, they had to investigate the Eastern Palace if the Emperor ordered them to enter the mountain. Defu quickly said, "How about this? The Crown Prince's bedroom is right in front. There are womenfolk inside. Just send 2 people in to search. If so many people go in and disturb the future Crown Princess, can you bear the responsibility?" This was not a bad idea. They had long heard that the Crown Prince had a mistress in his golden house. That person must be the future Crown Princess. Today's matter had not been settled yet. They did not want to make things too tense. This was a good idea. Thus, 2 people from the Imperial Dragon Guards walked out to search. Defu heaved a sigh of relief and only let the 2 people in. He stayed at the door to guard the remaining people. After the 2 people entered, they revealed strange smiles. Seeing that there was no one in the courtyard, they ran in a direction. Gong Yimo hid in the dark and clearly saw that they pulled something out of the dry well. When the cloth bag was opened, it was indeed a dragon robe. The 2 people were overjoyed and shouted, "Young priest! We found something." The people outside heard their voices from afar. Ignoring Defu's attempts to stop them, they forced their way in. Gong Yimo also walked out at the right time. Looking at the 2 people, she smiled. "You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.